And now it's time to bait our hooks, cast our nets, drop our poles in the water, and fish for some jokes with Down on the Docks. Well. Welcome to episode 15 of Down on the Docks. I'm joined by producer extraordinaire, Dave Sarah. How you doing today, buddy?
Hello. I'm doing great.
Yeah, what's missing today? Dustin?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so guess what? Here's what we do when we don't have a host around here. When you've been playing shithole clubs like I have in Los Angeles.
We're missing my boner. That's what I wanted to say.
You got the wrong. I think you're on the wrong podcast right now.
I'm late on the joke.
Anyway, when you've been in stand-up comedy as long as I have, you go to the pros. And when you cover an episode like we're going to cover today, you go to an 80s pro.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm excited to announce we have a very special guest, obviously, in the studio. You've seen him on the Jellies. I'm Dying Up Here. Of course, Roast Battle. He also co-hosts the Comedy Store Wrestling podcast, and he hosts his own podcast, which I've been a fan of for years, Inappropriate Earl. Earl Skakel's on the show, everybody. Welcome to the show, Earl.
Hell yeah.
The honor is mine. I'm embarrassed that you haven't been on Inappropriate Earl.
Oh.
I was in a dark place when you started that, and I just came out of that dark place about 6 months ago. So I am a free agent now, and I am willing and able.
I mean, it's the little podcast that could. I mean, not many. I think I'm at episode 358.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think Rogan's at 2,000, so it's not on his level. But I haven't made $1 on the show.
But you're consistent with your content, and that's what matters.
For the most part. I mean, now that I do the Comedy Store Wrestling podcast, I'm more consistent with that.
Yeah.
Just because everything's done for me. I literally walk in. Eddie's the brains, my co-host. John Sosis is the engineer. And lately I've been cutting wrestling promos on Roast Battle, and they're perfectly edited. So it's really, I'm not lazy, but it is nice to. I'm not very technically inclined.
Yeah,
I'm horrible at it. So it is really nice
to. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Not have to do anything, but just show up.
Just show up and walk up.
That's pretty much what you do,
Well,
Dave.
that only happened today because we were, shooting on a little bit on a different day. Earl was coming in. We had to make accommodations, and it is late. I do work a 9 to 5.
Well,
I'm not like you guys.
What day do you usually shoot on?
Sundays.
Yeah. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the show, and by those I just mean Earl and Lois, basically, I told you that we break down a documentary every week. And then, of course, we insert our own personal brand of humor. And I saw this documentary, and I said, there's only one person in the world that I need to bring on to discuss this documentary, and it was you. And I just seen it. And just so you know, it is Curse of the Chippendales, released in 2021, directed by Jesse Vile. It's on Discovery Plus on Amazon. It's a 4-parter. I saw this. I watched this, and as soon as I did, like the Ghost in the Machine Facebook was listening to me because I went on your Instagram. I didn't go to your Instagram. I just turned on Instagram, and I see you walking down the street doing a tour of one of the old Chippendales famous clubs in West LA.
It was the original Chippendales club.
So did you just watch it and you were like, I got to go back to where all the action was, where all the fucking dicks were swinging back in the day?
And you could feel the energy. I think after Chippendales, it was I might be wrong on this, but a preschool or...
Well, it's an adult daycare center now.
Yeah, I mean, well, now it's abandoned. So I think it went from the preschool to adult daycare, and now it's like I was telling our incredible producer, if I had like millions of dollars, I'll assume, based on what I saw on my walkthrough, it needs at least $1 million worth of renovations.
Right.
Just to scrape the cum off the walls and the ceilings.
Dude, you could smell it.
Everything smells like cigarettes.
Well,
like,
let's
not really.
You know what?
But the parking lot when you see the documentary and you see like the owner standing in the lot,
Yeah.
it's now just overgrown shrubbery, and it looks like at one point they were trying to start a greenhouse or something.
Yeah.
And it's now just overgrown with crap
Homeless
in
people.
it, like a homeless person's hoarding something.
Yeah.
But they're
fighting for territory. I got this corner.
but the building looks. I can't imagine what the inside looks like, but it's held up like. So I would like. There's a market for horny women still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem, I think, is
we don't have enough money to pay for them.
Well, I do, but no, I'm just kidding. But like now, there's like I was explaining to Dave, and I hope I'm not talking too much already.
No, you're not.
Shut up. Get in there.
Back then in the '80s, if you wanted to get laid, you had to go out.
Yeah.
Whereas now, if a woman's horned up, or a guy, she can go on Raya, Hinge.
But
Bumble.
you're swiping for hours. I mean, this was so great back then. You just showed up and it was expected.
Well, I mean, a guy could get laid really easily if you timed it right.
Right.
I don't know if it's too soon to tell this story.
No, jump in. Because you were there.
I mean, it's like Vietnam. You were either there or you weren't.
Right. Would you say that Chippendales was your personal Vietnam?
When they started moving around, because if you watch the documentary, you realize that I think they got in trouble with probably underage, selling booze to someone they shouldn't have.
They didn't let black people in either.
Well, that's what took them down.
And we'll get into that. But why don't you tell us about your initial experience?
Well, my initial experience was at Carlos and Charlie's, which for you LA local yokels, that was what Dublin's became.
It was Dublin's when I came, and that would have been 98.
So I'm talking in the early 90s when after the black dude sued them for discrimination, they literally went to nightclubs and did Chippendales.
Right. And we'll get into that because that's discussed as well. So my question is, when they were doing that Chippendales at the local clubs, where else did they go besides Carlos and Charlie's?
I don't remember specifically, but it was places like Carlos and Charlie's, like Red Onion. I think they did it for a bit in the marina at the Red Onion, where it was called the Spread Onion, just because, just animals. Kings would go there. A lot of NHL players, and I'm sure Lakers would go there because it was close to the Forum.
Yeah.
You just don't get it.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, do you guys want to go there? Because I can take you there.
Let's do it.
Let's take you there.
So let's dive in. Like I said, this is a 4-parter. Each episode's like 50 minutes long. So this thing starts with episode 1, which is called Take It Off. And, the first image we see is the famous, iconic Las Vegas, welcome to Las Vegas sign. And then it slowly gets a little seamier and dirtier and takes us down to Fremont Street. And then we hear some people talking, and they're obviously sketchballs. And they're up to no good. And the first one says, I was thinking, what you could do, you could maybe with a hammer or something, something nice and fast. And the second voice just laughs and he says, a hammer? And the first one goes, yeah, you know what I mean. Something real hard on the, you know what? And then go for the neck. And he's like, yeah, right. That's what I would do. So this is how this thing starts. We know that there's some creeps involved, but we don't know where this is headed. All we know is it's about the Chippendales. So the next scene, we see an FBI office in Las Vegas, and we meet a retired special agent by the name of Scott Garriola. Now, we learn in July of 1991, and I had never heard this, and I'll be curious to know if you've heard of this before, Earl. Someone walked into the FBI office and claimed that he just got back from London, and he was hired to kill 2 members of a male exotic dance group. And he claimed he was hired, and the plan was to inject 2 fatal doses of cyanide into these guys. And in exchange, he was going to receive $50,000. So Scott says, this is a little suspicious, and says, wait a minute, this is connected to a plot with multi-million dollars attached to it in a business called Chippendales. So my question is, had you ever even heard of this?
I mean, I hadn't heard of the specifics like that, but I knew because of the two guys who started it together.
Yeah.
You know, like most things, I even saw it a little bit with Roast Battle. Like, you know, I really did. Like, you know, how that show started, it was very similar to how Chippendales started.
Yeah.
Just two people had an idea.
Yeah.
And then once it takes off, the arguments
Right.
and the disagreements about who's owed more, you know, are they there to see the choreographer guy who
Right.
was like designed the shows, the lighting, the dance moves, or is it the Indian dude who, in his mind, created?
And we'll
the
get it.
show.
I'll get into those specifics.
So I could, you know, I'd always heard of, you know, the murder for hire plot, but I didn't know the depth of it.
Right. I had no idea. I never heard about any of this. And I'm kind of shocked that, you know, I never heard of this, as much true crime as I listened to. So the doc takes us right into the scene you were describing in the 80s. And it's just ripped guys at Chippendales. And the women are going fucking crazy. You know, they're literally sitting on the floors, which blew me away.
I mean, I'm telling you, and I never went to the Chippendales. The original Chippendales is on Overland in Venice, which is a small Mar Vista, Culver City.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with LA, so the Carlos and Charlie's Chippendales, it was like an ant farm of horny women.
Right.
And the only guy in there, outside of well, you know, you had the bartenders who were all ripped dudes.
Yeah.
Service was the MC. And you couldn't imagine a room that was like beyond breaking fire laws.
Yeah.
So that's another or fire.
Fire codes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me just set the scene for those of you that don't know what a Chippendale is. You picture a guy that's just ripped and cut. He's just glowing with a tan. He's got the bronzer on, and then of course they all wear black spandex pants.
Sure.
And underneath that, there's going to be 3 layers of G-strings. And then they have the cuffs around the neck
Right.
and the collar. Basically,
Only.
what's that?
Only the
Well,
cuff
it was
around
it
the
was an
neck.
homage to Playboy, Hugh Hefner's
Sure.
club. All the
Right,
women
right.
there,
Actually, I
they
never put
did
that.
that.
Never put that two.
Well,
those
that's
two
why I'm
together.
here. We're going to put more than that together today, Dave.
And I
So-
did sneak into the Playboy Mansion twice.
I did, but I was working, and I remember sneaking away and grabbing a couple beers and going over to the monkey cages
Yeah.
and just like pounding some beers and then getting back to work. And then I went in the grotto, of course, and then underground in all those rooms. But I will admit, it was my first year in LA, and I was cater waitering.
That's all good. I mean, I remember my friend Monty, who it's funny, he sells like $20 million homes now, and I'll tell
Hell
a
yeah.
real quick version of the story. Hefner had been married or divorced for like 6 years. No, I'm sorry, married for 6 years. He gets divorced, and he hadn't had the lingerie party for 6 years, out of respect for his wife, I guess. So this
Yeah,
was
right.
the first.
What a guy. Nicest guy on the
I
earth.
know. First, I don't know. Thank God the Me Too movement wasn't around this era.
Dude,
It was like
thank
the Why
God.
Not Me Too movement. So this was the first lingerie party they had had in 6 years. So every guy in planet Earth was flying into this to try and get in there. So me and Monty calls me up. He's a great bullshitter, dude. He could sell sand to a fucking Arab prince in the desert. Like he's just that guy.
Yeah.
And he calls me up about 11 at night. He says, "Hey, dude, we're gonna sneak into the lingerie party." I'm like, "Dude, there's no way we'll get in. This is the first one in 6 years. It's gonna be impossible."
Yeah.
He said, "Just put on your pajamas," because that was the rule. You had to be wearing pajamas.
Yeah.
Love it.
So we could go in there. There's 20 cars ahead of us. Secret Service type security at both sides of each car going, "Get the fuck out of here."
Yeah, yeah.
Get the fuck out of here. So literally every car in front of us got told to hit it. And Monty pulls up and this pretty big like security. He was clearly the head guy. It's like he puts his head in the window. Monty's like, "Yeah, Slick back there told us we're good." And he's like, "Enjoy the party, guys." And
Wow.
it was just like so amazing. So we get up there.
That's awesome.
We're afraid to, get out of the car, and the the valet's like, dude, guys, get in there, man. You guys are good.
Nice.
So we get in there, and the first person I see is Vince Neil from Motley Crue. I'm like, this is a good party.
Yeah.
Wow.
When Vince Neil,
Shout out to Devil.
and then these three bimbos with one had bigger tits than the other were like, who are you? And I told them I played in Kiss when they had the makeup on. So it was like a perfect bullshit lie. Like, oh, I don't know what they look like. So.
Yeah.
So then Monty, of course, went head first into the grotto pool. I'm like, I'm good.
Oh shit.
Like,
Oh yeah, I thought you meant
He's
to.
a maniac.
Yeah.
I remember being in there and it felt like I was in a James Bond movie because it's still like 70s to this day with all the buttons and controls on the wall. And you feel like you're just on a movie set. It doesn't look real.
Well, it's just like, I don't think I'll ever experience this again where the hot girls come up to you. 'Cause
Yeah.
there weren't that many
Yeah.
dudes at
Yeah.
this party. It's probably, I would say the ratio was 70-30.
Wow.
All of Half's horny buddies, Dr. Mark Saginaw, Ron Smith, the celebrity, he owned that company with the celebrity impersonators. Somehow he was roped into Hefner's circle. Garth Fisher, he did all the surgeries for the Playmates. And then me.
Yeah, yeah.
Me and Vince Neil and Larry Elder. I don't mean to talk
shit.
politics, but
Yeah.
He was there.
Larry Elder was dressed as King Tut, and there's some bimbo walked by us, and Larry Elder looks at me and goes, "Good luck with that, kid." That's why I voted for him.
Yeah.
Larry!
Known white supremacist Larry Elder.
No, he hates black people. I've never seen a
It's so
black guy who
crazy.
hates blacks.
It's a hell of a platform.
Yes.
What would you call that, though? I guess Uncle Tom?
I mean, technically speaking, I think it's like the definition.
But like he is so funny to me, like him and Leo Terrell. But now we're going off the rails.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the murders. So these murders that we're
Oh
hearing
shit, there's
about.
murder involved?
Yeah, I just talked about the
Oh,
murder plot
shit.
about the two
Okay.
people. So we don't know who it is, but somebody was going to get injected with cyanide.
Oh, right. The
Right.
attempted murder.
Right. So this FBI agent basically claims this is the most bizarre murder plot he's ever investigated for the FBI. So titles come up like you would typically do in the neon pink and blue. And we open on LA in 1982 over the classic song Ladies Night by who, Earl?
Cool in the Gang.
That's right. So we're at the original West LA Chippendales, and the lines are around the fucking block. This blew me away. I mean, you hear about lines around the blocks, but they literally show the block and it just keeps going. And then they take us in the club and
There's lines everywhere in that place, I bet.
oh, we're going to get to that. Men are literally strutting, but they're like doing this thing with their body. So like their dicks they're in their G-strings, but
Right.
they're thrusting so much. You could see these dicks almost flying out.
They're
of the
flopping.
Yeah, they're flopping. And again, it's just packed. There's so many women there. And this is when we meet a woman named Nancy Dineen, and she's like a regular. And she says it was her favorite place, and it was where she took her girlfriends to experience a fantasy she's never was able to experience. And then we meet her future husband, who's one of the stars of Chippendales, and his name's Michael Rapp. And do you remember The Perfect Man?
I do.
Did you ever see The Perfect Man?
I might have at Carlos and Charlie's. Might have seen him walking around because he did look really familiar to me. But they didn't let dudes in there
Right.
during the performance, and I don't think too many guys really wanted to be in there. Well, it was Chippendales actually.
Well, according to Michael, it said he felt like a star, and it made him feel like he could do anything. He said, "At Chippendales, I'm untamed, I'm wild, I'm lustful, I'm all the things I want to be," and he was the star of The Perfect Man.
Well, that's how I feel at the Comedy Store. But that's the only thing I can literally wrap my head around, and certainly I'm not seeing the Comedy Stores like prime Chippendales, but Chippendales was if you were a hot, horny housewife or a bachelorette party or a college co-ed, I mean, it was really I do remember that at the Carlos and Charlie's location. It was a very broad age range of 21-year-olds to 50-year-olds.
Yeah.
So
How is the puss at the Comedy Store these days? Is it getting better? It was been kind of slow there last couple
I don't
years.
know, it's been pretty good lately.
Yeah,
but
last time I was there was maybe May.
Well, I only bring up the Comedy Store in regards to Chippendales because Chippendales was like the Comedy Store where you know if you like a certain comic, you can meet him after
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
set,
Yeah.
or girl.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a guy and you want to meet, I don't know.
Well,
Steph
and these
Toll
guys talk about like getting off stage and being bombarded by like 200 women, and all wanting their number.
Yeah, I mean, I don't say. I'm not gonna lie and say I've experienced that, but when I'm in the main room sometimes, and I do pretty well most nights, not every night, but most nights, you know, I get at least probably 2 or 3 audience members. Hey, how are you? You want a drink? You want to hang out at Saddle Ranch?
You want to go
wanna
up the street where I know where this curtain is behind a.
Yeah.
Basically,
Jerk
I mean,
curtain.
I have gotten offers like that. Now that's not 200 women, so it's not on the level of a
Sure.
Chippendales dancer, but I can somewhat know how Mike felt.
Yeah, like I went to Costa Rica, and over there the prostitution's like legal. So there's no like a prostitution union almost.
And
There's
now
no,
back to
hold
our
on,
story.
real quick. That's how it is everywhere you go, though. In these cities that's like kind of known as like party cities, you go to the casino or whatever, and there's just girls trying to massage you, trying to grab your cock. Everything's because they're prostitutes.
Yeah, but this is different. This
It
is
is
free
different.
sex.
I get it, but I'm just saying, like being that feeling that women can kind of get, like when they go out, they're constantly being bombarded by men. It's kind of the same feeling with women. Anyway,
Well, yeah, I mean, at Chippendales, it was like literally like a cattle call for
Yeah.
these women to see.
Well,
yeah,
Even the MC was a good-looking dude.
Sure.
Like he was probably the worst-looking guy in the show, and he was still like, if you saw the MC at the gym or I don't know at the post office, you'd be like, "Who's this hot guy?"
yeah.
Well,
So there was no uglies.
Let me explain to you how it started. So basically, Chippendales was bought by a man by Steve Banerjee, and it wasn't called Chippendales at the time. It was called Destiny 2. Do you remember Destiny 2?
I do. I heard about it, never
Okay.
experienced.
So
it.
Destiny 2 was a bar, and this man by the name of Steve Banerjee bought the place, and you know he's trying to figure out how to bring people in. And this is where it gets interesting, and we cross over into Hollywood because he hooks up with a guy by the name of Paul Snyder, who was a man who introduced Dorothy Stratton to the world of Playboy. So they were both from Vancouver, BC, and she was 19 at the time. I want to say he was in his mid-20s, and he feels like he hit the jackpot when he walks into this Dairy Queen and finds Dorothy Stratton. She's just beyond a smoke show. And he even takes her to prom. They made a very famous movie about this called Star 80, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But this was the guy who went to Banerjee and said, I'm from Canada, and we have these things up north where it's all male dancers. You should try it down here. And they all think he's nuts. They're like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And he's like, trust me, it'll work. Now, meanwhile, Steve, he's experimenting with like mud wrestling nights and crap like that. And
I mean, there was a club that did huge business out here called the Tropicana. It's on Sunset and Western by the Home Depot, and it was the mud. It was where Vince Neil met his first wife. So it was
Holy
just,
shit.
It was like Chippendales in reverse. Like it was all playmates who maybe had aged out. Models who they aged out, and guys would go to pay. Don Barris was the MC there.
was he really?
So he was really funny. He'd go, the bigger the bill, the bigger the thrill. And like he'd get these guys to just bid $100, $200, $300, $400 to wrestle with a playmate.
Oh shit! Oh wow! To go wrestle with the playmate, that's fucking
Yeah,
awesome.
it got pretty. I did it once.
You did?
I did. My girl was hot. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they were perfect. Every one of them
I
perfect.
think it was the reason this thing became such a phenomenon is, they were in the right place at the right time. And there's a guy there who became close with the owner, Bruce Nain. He's a big part of this documentary. He becomes their lawyer and ultimately their fixer for a bunch of crap they got to deal with. And basically, Bruce says it was a time rampant with drinking and drugs. The pill had just been invented, and AIDS wasn't on anybody's radar. So that was another reason that this sex is so easy to get and such a marketable opportunity.
Well, yeah, because you talk about AIDS in the early '80s. It was really
Well, this is 1979.
well.
Yeah.
But even then, it was
Yeah.
really thought of as just a gay disease because
Yeah.
the hot pockets of it were bathhouses in New York,
Right.
San Francisco, and some in LA. So it wasn't until I think what started happening was bisexual men started sleeping with women. They would contact it, and then they'd fuck a straight guy, and then it just like
Yeah.
it's very much. That's why I always compared COVID to AIDS. Like we still
Thank
know,
God.
but I mean, like we still don't know how COVID really started,
Yeah, or
and
spread
then
quickly.
spread, and we still don't know. 2 years
Yeah.
later,
Yeah.
So AIDS was very much like that.
Sure. And once it becomes a thing where, I mean, if you're going to go from gay to, like,
Well, do
It's
you remember
obviously gonna
Sandra
spread most quickly.
Theodore? The name, does that ring a bell?
the girl.
She was Hefner's girlfriend for about 5 years. She lived at the mansion, and she was in the dock. And she had an interesting quote. She said, back then, it was an extremely sexual time. The way people dressed, the music, and everybody slept with everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
it was. I mean, it's so hard to explain those times.
Right.
I mean, I had a guest on. This is not some subtle way to plug my podcast, but on Inappropriate Earl, there was an episode with Jeffrey Mark, who was a gay comic, nightclub singer, and he talked about fucking Freddie Mercury in a bathroom at a New York bar because he was just like, that's just what we did.
Yeah.
Like you could fuck probably the greatest singer of all time at and this was when Queen was gigantic.
yeah.
You can fuck this guy in the bathroom at a New York bar. It's just you can't. I'm sure that stuff goes on to some degree, but it was just it's a wild time, man.
Well, when they were shaping this show in the beginning, they didn't even have choreography or anything like that. And it was just a contest to be like, who was the sexiest guy? And Snyder was actually an MC there when he started. And basically, they're doing this on the weekends. And then they premiere the show in January of '79. And immediately they know that they're on to something. So Steve, it wasn't called Chippendales yet. Steve rebranded it as Chippendales because he wanted a classy name. So he took the name from the Chippendales Furniture Company. That was his idea of like giving it some panache and some, zazz. So again, Paul Snyder, who brought Dorothy Stratton down from Vancouver, BC, he's the one that brought in the cuffs and all of that stuff. And what do you call it? The collars as well. And then Hefner wants to come in. So Hefner actually went to the club. There were no men allowed. But of course, they made an exception for him. And he thought, I think he was humbled by it and he thought it was cool. So, basically, this point, they were like, okay, we need a real MC. And then they hired this man by the name of Richard Barsh. And before every show, he gets everybody chanting, take it off every night. So they start raking it in. I mean, they're just like counting stacks of money. They can't even like put it in the bank fast enough.
It's all cash.
It's all cash.
Yeah.
And then the cops, like you were saying, sure enough, they show up and they want to shut the place down because they tell Chippendales you're holding illegal performances. And what they did is they arrested the dancers for nudity and indecent exposure because they broke a law that the men were touching the women. And you can't do that if you're serving alcohol.
Right.
So no big deal. They write up a bunch of rules and they hire a beverage and alcohol lawyer. And then they just make an announcement before the show that says, these are the rules.
Right.
Like basically you could tip us, but you can't put the money directly on our dicks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like we need you to hand it to us and then we'll put it down our pants.
What's the McConaughey line? I think Louis did it in one of his bits. The law says you can't touch, but I see a lot of rule breakers out there, or some shit like that from the movie from Magic Mike.
Well, it's like the prostitutes when you go to a prostitute's house now. They say you have to put the donation on the table.
Sure.
And then all time is all money exchanges
Right.
for time and companionship. And I told the last one, that's I know.
Yeah.
That's
That's how they used to get around like all the weed laws and stuff too.
Yeah, right.
Or if you want to have a party or want to throw some kind of event, you got to do the drink tickets. You can't like sell alcohol, but you can sell a ticket and you have to give 2 tickets for a beer or whatever the fuck. Like if you want to have a private event, then
But
and
it's
charge
also,
for-
I think the dancers were fucking.
yeah,
women in
no,
the
obviously,
bathroom
sure.
and,
I'm talking about minor loopholes, but like this, I'm sure was crazy.
You know, I
yeah.
think, and there was nudity. Like you said, I'm sure it had something to do with the liquor license, and
Yeah.
you can't have some guy's fucking 9-inch pole, you know, getting jacked off in the VIP area. Like,
They don't touch on any of that in the documentary.
well, I think it was a lot like there was another club. It had nothing to do with. You've all seen Boogie Nights, right? Of
course.
Yeah. And you know Alfred Molina.
Yeah.
And if you've seen Wonderland, Eric Bogosian, they were playing the wacky Arab guy, Eddie
Yep.
Nash.
The Nash.
The
You can't fuck
Nash.
with the Nash.
Can't fuck with
Who, if you don't know who Eddie Nash is, for kicks, he knew girls liked cocaine. So what he would do is, before they come over to his house, he'd take a huge shit, and he'd be like, "I'm not going to charge you any money for the coke, but you have to lick my ass clean." So
Oh, Jesus.
crazy.
that must be a real hoot at the
That's
holiday
crazy.
parties. But he was very much like Steve, like, you know, in the Starwood, which was on Crescent Heights in Santa Monica, and you could they still kept the outlier of the they had like a steeple, like a Taj Mahal type. That's still there. He just paid off the cops, like, you know.
Sure.
Motley Crue played there, David Lee, Van Halen, Quiet Riot, like Rat, the Cars, Blondie,
Yeah.
and there's Quaaludes, Coke. So I think there's a lot of parallels to Chippendales and the Starwood, because they were both doing the same. Payoff cops.
Well, the cops was the biggest inspiration for Richard to create a theme. So the cop was one of the first characters that they created in the show
yeah, I mean,
because they got busted by the cops.
because everyone likes a sexy cop. If you're a chick,
Yep.
there's nothing hotter probably than to have some sexy cop, you know, looks like, you know, Ellis from Die Hard, you know,
so if
the
you're-
great Hart Bachner.
I was in junior high, asshole.
Yeah, this is just like Vietnam. No, this is just like Saigon, huh? Slick. I was in Vietnam, or I was in, junior high, asshole.
Junior high, asshole. Well, you're right, because Sandra Theodore, the playmate they interview, she was like, they had this character Zorro, but she was like, it didn't work for me. She's like, I immediately went up to the cop and said, "You're coming home with me." But again, it's just that like, hey, I loved your work. Let's go home and fuck. I mean, that just doesn't happen now.
That's
I mean,
like the
no,
place. That's like the place to do it.
But it's like the Village People, which is obviously for probably basically the gay version of Chippendales. You know, first character created was the cop.
Yeah.
The singer was Victor Willis. Here's the crazy thing. This has nothing to do with anything. They say the falling man from 9/11, you know, that first guy was Victor Willis's brother.
Really?
Because he worked in one of those towers, and they had narrowed it down to what that person was wearing, jumping. So, you know, but, you know, the Village People, you know, you had the cops.
That's wild.
They're very
The
Chippendale.
Indian.
And they were before Chippendales.
Oh, yeah.
The Indian, the construction guy, the leather daddy guys. They didn't really have a leather daddy guy in Chippendales, but
Maybe that's really the first costume is a leather daddy, because it was a thing. I guess not. I don't know.
of how he
I'm
bails on
retarded.
his own
I bailed
idea.
on it.
It's going to happen.
I
around
bailed.
here.
So I would bet that Chippendales, probably Snyder, probably took some inspiration from the Village People. Like, hey, these guys do well with gay men. What if we dress straight guys like that for hot chicks?
Yeah.
Love
Well,
it.
they all thought he was crazy. They were like, "This is the dumbest thing we've ever done, but we'll try it." And of course, I mean, 6 months later, it's every night. Because, you know, they started out with a couple of nights and then the lines got longer and they were just doing it every night. The interesting thing is that the neighbors got freaked out, and they showed this in the documentary. They were all complaining because people were like fucking on their lawns, used rubbers all over their lawns. And then they said needles, which really blew me away. I mean, I guess I underestimated the amount of like needles and like that people were shooting coke, you know. Back then, it just didn't track for me, but that was one of the reasons why, you know, they were getting so many complaints.
Well, that's what took down the Starwood. It's funny. I never really thought about the parallels between the two. You know, if you ever drive by Santa Monica and Crescent Heights, it's all apartments that are around that building still. Now it's a Russian deli.
Yeah.
But I could only imagine Nikki Sixx and David Lee Roth and
Yeah.
Van Halen fucking some groupie. And oh, yeah, I wouldn't be too psyched if I was a neighbor here.
Yeah.
Well, one of the Chippendales that's featured in this, his name's Dan Peterson. He explains he got hired as a host, and his job was to like greet the women, and then they show him like pushing in like a row of women in wheelchairs. Like everybody came. It didn't matter your age, and he even claims that one woman offered him 20 grand for his semen. You know, I mean, this is 80s, buddy, too.
Like, what was she gonna do with it?
She was gonna inseminate herself so she could have.
That's a very specific process. I feel like $20,000 is a good rate.
But back then, there wasn't the scientific advances there are. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it was like literally fuck me, come in me, and
That'll work.
Well, Banerjee at this point, he's spending over $1 million a year on legal fees.
Jesus.
Well, if you ever go to Overland in Venice, where the original Chippendales is, it's all homes and apartments. So I can only imagine the noise and the ruckus. Because like I said, never went to that original location because I was 15, 16 years old. But I do remember driving by it on because I was dating a girl in Culver City, and my dad would literally drop me off at her house, and it was like. You ever see that Springsteen video for Born to Run Live where it's just that crowd shot as you don't even know where the end of the...
Yes.
That's what it looked like to me. Just hundreds of women. It seemed like hundreds of
Well,
women.
let me give you some context on the place. Max capacity on the Overland Club was 299 people, but they were bringing in twice that. I mean, it was standing room only. So like they show a shot of the stage, and it's just tiny because there are women just sitting on the floor, rows and rows and rows, and the stage is so tiny because they were trying to get so many packed in there. So at this point, this is like April 1980. Snyder married Dorothy Stratton because her career started taking off. And of course, he already gotten fired from Chippendales at this point. So they ditched him. And then, of course, we know this great movie, which this story is detailed, called Star 80, directed by Bob Fosse. And if you haven't seen it, you got to see it. It stars Meryl Hemingway and Eric Roberts, who you and I both agree should have won an Oscar for this film.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think if you look at some of the movies that came out in 1980, Star 80, very dark movie.
Yeah.
Cruising with Al Pacino, which is a very, very dark movie.
Yeah.
Especially if you can find the one with the 40 minutes of footage they cut out so they wouldn't get an X rating. And then A Thief with Michael Mann.
One of my favorite films.
Not a dark movie, but like it's very darkly lit and gritty. So, I don't think the Academy Award would ever go to an actor for playing a sexual freak.
You think Hef liked me? I got nervous around Hef. I don't know if I did a good job tonight.
Oh, my favorite scene in Star 80, and I've always wanted to do a parody of it, is when he's talking to himself in the Speedos in the bathroom.
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah.
Paul Snyder. And he's practicing how to introduce himself at parties. Hi. Paul Snyder.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you? Paul Snyder. And then he skips a beat and just looks at himself in the mirror. Fuck you.
It's a dark fucking movie. Shades of Taxi Driver in that scene.
Fuck all of you.
Yeah.
Well, and I told you this, the guy who plays his upstairs neighbor.
He's a character actor.
Stanley Kamel.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
He's in everything from the 80s.
He played, I mean, any younger people would know him as Luke. He was towards the end of 90210, Luke Perry was dating a girl, and she had a mob father, and he was the mob father. Very good-looking older gay dude. I used to train people at this gym in West Hollywood called Workout Warehouse, and I
remember it.
He was always trying to fuck me.
That sounds like it could be a gym and also a gay bar and also like a nightclub.
Well, I think here's the funny thing. You say that. Me and Eric, my Chippendales buddy, he, once again, above Workout Warehouse was this gigantic, it was a warehouse.
I remember.
Yeah. Where do you work out?
There's a gay bar called Axis.
Oh.
But on Friday nights, they had lesbian night.
Do they spell it X like
No,
XS?
right.
Okay. Axis.
AXIS.
Whatever.
But Eric knew the door guy because the door guy was an actor. So he would let me and Eric in. So it's literally no dudes in there. Me and Eric and like 300 or 400 lesbians.
Geez.
And but
Convert a
you
couple
could
of
always
them.
turn one or two. And the door guy was like a huge black dude. He's like, "Hey, have a good time, Earl and Eric, but don't touch the girls."
Yeah, I'm sure his voice was that much deeper that you had to go deeper too.
Well, he was like if you've ever seen the movie The Wildlife with Comedy Store paid regular Angel Salazar,
Where's
Hart Bachner from Die Hard, and Sean Penn's brother. It was a ripoff of Fast Times. Or, not a ripoff, a loose sequel
to Fast Times,
but with Chris Penn.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where they go to a strip club, and the huge black door guy says that line. And the huge black door guy in The Wildlife, you might know him as Kevin Peter Hall, a.k.a. also known as the Predator. He was the actual Predator.
Kidding.
It's one of the few times you see the Predator
not being a Predator.
What he looked like.
Yeah,
so,
interesting.
Now you can see a Predator at roast battle probably every week.
Well, getting back to Dorothy Stratton and Snyder, for those that don't know the story, so Snyder was obsessed with Dorothy Stratton and making her a star, but he's hanging out at the Playboy Mansion, and Hefner's like, "Get this greaseball away from us. Get him to stop hanging out." And at this point, Dorothy, she does Miss August, I want to say, and then she gets Playboy of the Year, and she blows up, and then she gets a movie role in Bogdanovich's film. I can't remember what the name of it was, but they're shooting in New York. She falls in love with Bogdanovich, and at this point, she comes back to LA to break everything off with Paul. And as the story goes, all of her friends, including Hefner, said, "Do not go over there alone." And what does she do? She goes over to the West LA condo and says, "I'm giving you half of everything I have," which is like $7,000. She even had like $1,000 on her at the time. And then the roommate, the guy who played the roommate in the movie, he comes home. He thinks they're sleeping, doesn't knock on the door. And then the next day, he knocks on the door and finds them both dead because Snyder raped her, blew her brains out, and then put the gun in his mouth and blew off his head. And you and I talked about this because I got deep into this years ago, and I did some deep diving. And according to what I remember, and they show this in Star 80, he made a sex chair, and then he strapped her to it, and then he blew her head off. Her eyeball was stuck on the wall, and then he had sex with her post-mortem.
See, I never heard that before.
Yeah.
So, well, here's the weird thing. I was in the TV movie, The Babe Ruth Story.
Were you really?
I just played one of the Yankees because I looked like when I had a flat or semi-flat top, I looked like a 20s, 30s baseball player. And I think he played Branch Rickey in the movie was Bruce Weitz from Hill Street Blues.
Oh,
He's
yeah,
a little
yeah.
short actor.
Yeah.
He played Paul Snyder in the TV movie.
Correct.
Which I believe was...
Jamie Lee Curtis was in
Yes.
that. Yes.
I believe it was called Death of a Centerfold.
Yep.
So I talked to him a few times about it just because that was my first time ever on a movie of any movie set. And so there's a lot of downtime when you're doing a movie, even a TV movie, because it was a big, they were trying to beat the John Goodman Babe Ruth movie.
Mm-hmm.
So they were
God.
really,
I love those.
and Mark Tinker was the producer of my Babe Ruth movie. So it's a pretty big deal. And like, even Bruce Weitz was like, "Yeah, Eric did a much better job than I did." I mean, he should have won the Oscar.
His performance is beyond engaging.
Yeah, it's sad that, and think how that would have changed his career if he would have won an Oscar.
Oh, absolutely.
Because then he kind of like, he did The Pope of Greenwich Village, which was a great movie, and then Best of the Best was kind of the start of the downfall.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Fucking pop it, Tommy, pop it.
Well,
Bye-bye.
continuing on the Stratton thing, I don't know if a lot of people know this. I'm sure you do, Earl, because you know everything 80s. So at this point, Bogdanovich is beyond distraught, and he has Dorothy's daughter, Louise, move in with her. And she comes down. She's 8 years Dorothy's junior. So she's like 12. And she moves in with Bogdanovich. And then Bogdanovich writes a book about Dorothy. And more importantly, his movie gets released to a very small distribution. So he sunk all of his money into a wider release of the film to honor Dorothy. He went bankrupt. He had to sell everything. But he was obsessed with her. And then he later married Louise. They were married for like 12 years.
Yeah, get that guy into LA comedy.
He'll fit in right
with that fucking
perfectly, right?
I mean, but it was such a different time where shit like you did that now, people would be like, dude, that's creepy as fuck.
Yeah.
But back in the 80s, I mean, it's just a different era, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Wish somebody told Jeff Ross that.
Well, you said it. I didn't.
And do you remember the guy in Star 80 that portrayed him? He was the guy that played Robin on Cheers. Do you remember his name?
That played Bogdanovich. Yeah. I mean, I don't.
His name's escaping me.
But it was just such a different era back then. You know, it was just. I mean, I was a kid back then, so I didn't really appreciate the time. You know, it's like
you're just wondering why does everything smell like cigarettes? I don't know why I said that again, but yes.
Even like, well, third time's the charm.
Matt, but that's all I remember.
Just keep running it into the ground, Dave. It'll hit at some point.
Dave, do you have any comedy background at all?
Zero.
Oh, I love it. Okay, now I won't.
No, I'm an open micer. That's the joke.
Yeah.
Do you do comedy, though?
Yeah.
You do comedy.
I don't
Not
do
very
comedy.
well. He shows up.
Where do you go up?
Oh, man, I was just doing Bert's back room before. It was something different. I'll do the Chateau every once in a while.
That place
Stop
is
bragging.
Try to do the. I've been signing up sometimes for the potluck, but I haven't been consistent for it, and I've never gotten called. I've never gotten emailed back for it.
Would you say
I've done it in the past,
though?
Huh?
Keep at it though, because
thank you.
it's the fairest. No, I'm talking about the Comedy Store potluck.
Yeah,
because it's the fairest it's ever
too.
been. It's randomly selected.
Sure.
So how many times a week do you go up? And I know
I haven't even done it in months.
I love it. I love
the last gig.
I love that grind.
The last gig.
It's not even a grind. Like I've kind of
canceled on me. I gave you a gig.
I kind of like I've been like I retired from open mic scene.
I don't blame
but
you
it's
there,
just
bro.
I mean, dude, it's impossible right now. There was a couple years where I had a nice little groove every night. I was good every couple of nights at least.
What do you do for work?
But I'm a graphic designer and cataloger for a high-end furniture company. Work on their web. IT nerd.
Okay.
But yeah. Sorry, guys.
There's no apologizing.
Go on, continue.
All right. So the club's expanding. It's booming.
I should have just said no. I don't have a comedy background.
It's time to expand. So what happens? Banerjee, Steve, he hires a man by the name of Nick DeNoia. Nick, at the time, was a producer, children's TV producer in New York, and he had a show called Unicorn Tales. I was curious to know if you ever remember this show, because I don't.
I never watched. I think I was into Hello Larry at the time with McLean Stevenson.
Okay, good call.
That's good. It was a good show.
So basically, our resident MC goes from Paul Snyder to Richard, and then Richard gets bounced out, and Nick DeNoia takes the helm. And Nick transforms the show from contest and a couple of characters to like a complete Broadway type show. So that's when Chippendales goes big. Now, Richard, they show him in the doc, and he says he got pushed out, and he's very emotional about this. He's upset, and he says, according to him, he's a believer in karma, and both Nick and Steve paid for it in the long run. So there's a little foreshadowing in the doc as far as that is concerned. Now, here's the pivotal moment that changes Chippendales forever. So one night, one of the dancers, Dan, he goes out to dinner with Steve and Nick, and they go to a diner in West LA. And Nick convinces Steve, I will take you to New York and make you the biggest successful show in New York. But in return, I want the touring rights to the Chippendales dancers in perpetuity. And he drew it up on a fucking napkin.
Hell yeah.
So at the time, Steve doesn't even know what the word perpetuity means. Mm-hmm. So he's like, yeah, sure, that sounds like a good deal. And that's how episode 1 ends. Now, episode 2 is titled Engulfed in Men. And I think you can see where we're going here. Uh-huh. So
Too easy.
Nick's quoted as saying that men are primal creatures and turned on by flesh, and women are turned on by personality. And that's why Chippendales aren't sex objects. They're total human beings, or else the night doesn't work. And then we see Michael Rapp lubed up on stage. And they show like a side angle. So you see it's like G-string, and it's his dick is so big and pushing out. Like you could see his pubes hanging out.
Yeah.
He did have a big dick.
Massive hog. So Bruce, the lawyer, he says, Nick was a New Yorker. He had a big choreographer resume. And more importantly, he had the charisma to front a sexy brand. And he also had the connections in New York to find them a club. So we see Nick, he's on like the Joan Rivers show. He's introducing the Chippendales. She calls them Pecs on Parade. And this is what gets Chippendales out into the mainstream. And according to Bruce, the terms of the napkin agreement stated, like I said, if Nick did this and secured the club, he gets the license to take them on tour forever. And according to Bruce, he says this is what ultimately leads to all this chaos and murder. Jesus. So it was essentially the demise of Chippendales, that napkin deal.
So wait, did the napkin deal ever get like solidified in like an actual deal later on?
Yeah.
Like
soon
later. In other words, whenever okay, continue. Sorry.
Okay.
Just want to make sure.
He even gives up on his questions.
Yeah.
I know, he's the best.
So in other words, fuck it, just continue.
It's the best.
It's so easy.
So at this point, we see the Chippendales. They're making all the rounds on all these like Sally Jesse Raphael shows. And, the women can't believe that what they're seeing. And of course, it's a huge promotional tool to get these people and get asses in their seats.
Sally Jesse, forget it.
And then in the background, they start showing burning buildings. And this is what basically, led to the arson attempts. But they don't explain right away who's doing it or why. And that'll come up a little bit later in the show. So anyway, Nick is practicing with the dancers in LA. He creates this huge show. He gets them to New York. And of course, that just takes off. And the New York club sat 600 people. So it's twice the size.
Hell yeah.
So Nick found a place on 61st and 1st. It was called Maggie at the time. And again, they were kind of doing what you were talking about, Earl, in the beginning, is they were hosting like Carlos and Charlie's was, just to give them a test run. Well, Nick takes this like full Broadway production. There's lighting cues, there's dancing cues, there's wardrobe, ensemble dancers. Roger Minash, one of the Chippendales at the time, he said it was Chippendales on steroids.
But I also think what kind of started to change the vibe at Chippendales was, it's my opinion, I know a gay dude when I see one, like,
amen.
I think they also started hiring gay dancers, like for the...
Really?
I have no proof,
sure.
but, if you look at the OG group of Chippendales guys at the Overland location, you could tell they were just straight, horned up dudes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Michael Rapp guy, he literally says, I grew up in East LA, and all I cared about was working out and going to the gym. And he saw an ad for Chippendales. He goes in and he sees Steve, and Steve's surrounded by stacks of money, and he's just counting the money. And he looks at him and he says, "You're hired." Just like that on the spot, because he was working out just to try and get sex.
But I think when they went to New York and they developed more of a Broadway, dancing, choreographed moves, very few straight guys can dance like that.
It's true.
Really?
It's a good
You
point.
think?
It's a great
Listen,
point.
there's some great straight dancers.
Yeah.
But if you look at the majority of dancers on Broadway,
It's another level.
and I'm talking about Tony Award winning plays, they're all gay dancers.
Right.
Most choreographers.
But see, I feel like this is different because these guys didn't set out to be Broadway dancers. They took jobs as male strippers, and then a phenomenon created, and they were the guys that were pushed into the spotlight to become this show.
I think that too, but I think when they went to New York and it was much more an emphasis of, dance and almost like a Liberace, Elton John type vibe. no straight guy can dance that well.
Sure.
I'm sure there's a few. Like,
Right.
You can't say,
I know what you mean.
but
Well, the problem with this is that Nick has this reputation for being pushy and abrasive. And do you remember when they interviewed Eric Gilbert, who, according to the documentary, he was the Chippendales creative director from 83 to 91. And I'm thinking, wait, isn't Nick the creative director? But I don't know. That's his title. But he said this. He said Nick was a drama queen, and he just liked to get in your face over stupid shit so he could be the A-dog. He liked to get on these dancers like they were his little bitches. He's like, we're not doing Cats here, you know? It's not fucking Hamilton. It's a fucking burlesque show. This is Eric talking and saying it's a burlesque show for women, and most of them are so fucking drunk they don't care how these guys are dancing. And then he says, I'm sure you're going to interview someone else that thinks he's a god, but Nick was just a dick. He was just a real mouthy dick. So the problem is Nick's creating enemies not only with Steve, but with the dancers. So this is when, Michael Rapp blows up in New York as the star, as the perfect man. His wife, who he met at the club, moves out there with him. And the opening night in New York was October of 83, and it sells out immediately. And I thought this was interesting. Did you know what the big hit number was for Michael Rapp?
A Perfect Man.
Yeah, he's lip syncing to "This Kid Is Hot Tonight" by Loverboy.
Oh, okay. Well, Loverboy was huge back in that. You got to understand, like, you see Loverboy, and they're still touring, by the way. And a fascinating thing about Loverboy is the bass player disappeared on a fishing trip 27 years ago.
Really?
They never found him. And I have a I sound like Tripoli now. I have a conspiracy theory that he's alive. He just got sick of playing Working for the Weekend.
What was the song that they played in Wonderland? Johnny would a big star, and it came out to LA. What is that song? It's a huge 80s song, but it was the opening song in Wonderland.
I'm drawing a blank right now, but I think that
Don't you know that you are a shooting star? Is that Loverboy? Because that's the song.
I think it is. They had some hits, man.
Yeah, they did.
Their problem was Working for a Weekend was so massive that anything they did after that, although they did do Mike Reno, the singer of Loverboy, did a duet, Almost Paradise, which was a pretty big hit. But I could see the hit song of Chippendales being a Loverboy song at that time.
Well, this is also when they started with the calendar. So the first year of the calendar, it's 1981. They crank out 100,000 copies, and then they're doing millions the next year. And these calendars were like the biggest fucking thing.
Yeah, that's right. The calendar.
They start merchandising.
They might have popped. Well, I guess it would start with women. Some kind of like swimsuit edition Playboy calendar. I wonder what was like the first calendar hit.
It was
probably Playboy.
Playboy.
But you got to understand, like in this time frame of 86, the internet. Like now, I don't think a calendar would sell well.
No, of course not.
Because, you could go on 1,000 websites and see a hot-looking dude or hot-looking girl. But back then, a calendar was definitely
some motivation.
These guys are going to events, and there's 10,000 people, women, showing up to buy calendars.
Yeah,
that's how big this was, and they're autographing.
You got to go out
calendars.
and get it, dude. That's
just a different era.
You have to go out.
Did you know that they also made sexy exercise tapes?
Oh yeah, they were pretty bad. I remember they were like, well, that's when the height of the aerobics craze.
Right, the Jane Fonda shit.
I would say from 83 to maybe 87. That you had that John Travolta movie, Perfect, which was filmed at the gym I worked at.
Yeah. By the way, 3 of the Chippendales were in Perfect.
Oh, I could believe that.
Yeah.
Well, I also became friends with Nick the Dick, who, if you've ever seen the Tom Hanks movie Bachelor Party, and I still talk to him. They went to Chippendales. They went to the real Chippendales on Overland and Venice and did the nightclub scene where Nick the Dick puts his dick in a hot dog, and Tom Hanks's future mother-in-law is like, "Is that the foot long?" And Nick the Dick goes, "And then some." So still friends. A shout out to Brett Baxter Clark.
They cranked out playing cards, sexy lingerie, sexy jeans, coffee cups, and even stuffed animals. I mean, can you imagine looking at a guy's hammer on your morning cup of coffee?
It's just a different era, man.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a gag gift.
Yeah, I guess.
Literally a gag.
So they're making so much money. Steve even says he didn't have enough dirt in his backyard to bury it.
because a lot of these businesses were like Mitzi,
All cash.
when they had the Vegas Comedy Club, they said there would be some weekends she would drive from Vegas to her home and by the Comedy Store in Hollywood with like $100,000 in just a duffel bag because it was
Really?
all cash.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. Well, this is when Michael Rapp literally becomes a celebrity just for doing a 5-minute dance routine called The Perfect Man. And he says his goal was to take you on a sexual journey, and he's going to engulf you in 6'4" of man. He says, I'm just about sex. I was made for sex. I want you to feel lust. I want you to lust after me as much as I lust after
Jesus
you.
Christ.
He says at this point, he felt like the king of New York. And of course, Nick, he's taken all the publicity and he's becoming famous in his own right. And Steve is the guy behind the scenes. And it's revealed that he had a stutter. He didn't speak English very well. He was Indian. And he's so jealous. He hires a PR firm to coach him in interviews.
That was horrible.
And he bombed. Worse than Dave.
They did that's impossible.
Dude, quite
They did
impossible.
a test interview.
Yes.
Where they filmed it, and some people are just good on interviews. You and I are veteran podcast guests and producers. Dave's, he's like the Steve Banerjee of podcast guests, like stuttering through shit, giving up halfway on questions.
Yeah,
According to Eric, he bombs and he has zero charisma.
Well, but it goes to this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but in a way it does. I got Sean Avery, the hockey player, his first time ever doing stand-up at the Comedy Store Saturday night. It's
And he crushed, probably.
packed room. He literally had never done stand-up before, and he killed.
Yep.
Like, he was probably, I would say me and him had the best sets that night. And you think that's crazy. Earl, you've been doing comedy 22 years, and a guy who's never done it before had the same set you did. And he did, like, some people, Sean has it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but, Steve did not have.
And not only did he not have talent, he didn't have an eye for talent because he would bring in guys that he wanted to bring in, and Nick would just immediately reject them. And not only that, Nick would dress down Steve in front of the entire Chippendales crew, and like he had no backbone. So
brown eye for talent.
a brown eye for talent.
That's right, sir.
Keep him going, Dave.
Gosh, man, did you write on Undateable?
So, again, according to Michael Rapp, people are referring to Nick as the king of Chippendales and the creator of the phenomenon. And that's when Steve loses his mind. And that's when Michael thinks that all the success is going to Nick's head as well. So in 84 in LA, they actually start getting backlash. And they show a woman on the Phil Donahue show, and she's middle-aged, and she walks out, and Donahue's trying to track her down. And she's like, why are you leaving? He's like, why are you leaving? And she's like, I didn't know that this kind of like filth was going to be on today. And it doesn't stop there. So what happened is this is when the fire bombings started. And the Chippendales wasn't getting firebombed. Other clubs that were competing with Chippendales were getting firebombed.
Well, it's like any hit TV show, any hit stand-up show, any hit, anything that can be ripped off. I'll say it again, roast battle.
Yeah.
Right now, there's, I'll name the shows, just give them some publicity. These open micers got to have somewhere to perform.
Yes, sir.
You got Roast Battle, the OG show. Then you've got Battle Roast. Then Comic Wars. Now Roast League. And it's all the same shit. They're just ripping off what Brian Moses created.
Right.
With a little help from me.
Yeah.
But so I can only, because you can't really, you could trademark the name Chippendales, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
You can't trademark male dancing.
yeah.
Right.
So it's that's why Thunder from Down Under is called Thunder from Down Under. It might as well be called Chippendales.
Right, right.
Well, at this point, Steve fires Nick because he just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. And this is when Nick exercises his right from the napkin deal to take Chippendales out on the road. And that's what he does. And that is even a bigger success than either one of these clubs. So, Nick is pissed at Steve. Steve is furious with Nick, but they're still making tons of fucking money. And it's just getting out of control. All this cash, it's everywhere. So the breakdown was a 50-50 split from the touring rights. Now, the original napkin deal said Nick gets everything, but they must have worked something out, and the documentary doesn't make this clear, but they do make it clear that Nick is still giving Steve 50% of the gate from the tour minus expenses. So they're playing to 2,500 seats a night on the road. All right? So this is like so much fucking money, and Steve is pissed because he feels like he got suckered from the napkin deal. So episode 2 ends with a 911 call reporting a murder in New York City. And then 3 begins. It's called Money After Money. And we find out that person that was murdered in New York was Nick DeNoia in his office on 40th Street in Midtown Manhattan. So we meet the detective, Mike Geddes. He's the New York NYPD detective. And he responded to the scene. What happened is a gunman took the elevator up to the 15th floor. He walks into the office and he says to a guy, "Hey, are you Nick DeNoia?" Well, the guy that answered was not Nick DeNoia. He's like, "No, he's down the hall." So the guy that says, "I'm not Nick DeNoia," he gets up to go take a piss. And then he's in the pisser and he hears a gunshot. And then he comes out, sees somebody going down the stairwell and walks in and finds Nick dead with a bullet to his head.
Fuck.
So, of course, the Chippendales, they're on the road in Indianapolis. They hear of all this. And, of course, the show must go on.
But that's the crazy thing about back then, you could do something like that, whereas now there's probably, I don't know how the killer got away, whether it was a car down the block or just ran 3 blocks. There'd be 50 cameras you could pull.
Yeah.
But back then, there's no cameras, so it was a great time to kill someone.
Yeah. And at this point, they interview a dancer by the name of Reed Scott. And interestingly enough, he spells his name Reed, like read a book, which I've never seen in my life.
Yeah.
He didn't think
a book, right? You never see one in your life.
What's that?
Because you're dumb.
Okay, I'll keep going.
This guy's killing it.
He's crushing himself.
Gotta fill the time sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes it's best just to not talk to fill the time.
You're right about
especially
that.
when I'm doing narrative work. So anyway, Reed Scott says there's no way that Steve could have done this because he was so mousy and intimidated by Steve. He would never be able to pull this off. So the cops look into it. They can't find any criminal record in Nick's background. They check his associates. They're all clean. And Michael Rapp says, there would have been a lot of people that would wanted to have killed him because he was so difficult to work with and of his abrasive personality and rubbing people the wrong way. But again, no evidence, no fingerprints, no pictures. Like you said, no video evidence. All they had was the eyewitness account from a gentleman by the name of Will Mott. So Nick's assistant, Candace, she says it's the opposite, that the cops did not do their due diligence because she says she's on the road and none of her dancers were interviewed and she wasn't even interviewed. At this point, Bruce, the lawyer behind Chippendales, he gathers $40,000 as reward money and he goes to Steve and says, "Hey, do you want to chip in and make this reward bigger so we can catch Nick's killer?" And Nick says, "Absolutely not. I should pay the man that killed him. He did me a favor."
Oh.
And you're like, okay, that's cool. Nothing suspicious about that. So the case goes cold and, they're waiting for a witness to come forward and it never did. So when Nick died, he had no will. So everything went to his siblings and his siblings turned around and sold the rights back to Steve. So at this point, Steve owns everything. So did you catch this? There was a jingle and I rewound it a couple of times, but the jingle was, "Chippendales is the place to meet. Ladies in the driver's seat." Do you remember hearing that on the radio?
I think Desmond Child wrote it. I got to be honest with you, I don't recall hearing Chippendales commercials. They were so successful out here, they didn't have to do commercials. So
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that was New York to help get them going. But it was the perfect business in LA. because I never saw a billboard. It was the ultimate word of mouth. Hey, have your bachelorette party here, have our bachelor party here. So, so I don't remember that.
Well, Steve takes it global. So they start going to Europe. And according to Michael, these places are so big, there are women with binoculars watching them from like balcony. They're playing like 4,000, 5,000 seaters. And this is weird because Eric, the creative director, he recalls Steve walking into his office one day saying how sad he was that Nick was gone. Again, Rapp is the big star in New York. He's on the Geraldo show, and he goes on Geraldo and says, "I live the perfect life. I would never cheat on my wife."
Well, anyone who says that's cheating on their wife.
Exactly.
Especially first. Dude.
So his wife finds a phone number in his pocket and calls the woman up and busts him. Meanwhile, this guy's banging every chick he can. He said he was getting 200 phone numbers a night, and he would do coke every night. He'd go bang the chick, and he said as soon as I climaxed, I would feel extremely guilty and then just rush home. So the club is the LA club at this time. It's still receiving complaints from the fire department for overcrowding. This is when they get sued for gender discrimination for refusing to admit men into the club. And as if things couldn't be any worse, what happened is a guy wanted to go in. Keep in mind, after 10, you were allowed to go in because the show.
I know that.
Yeah, you knew the rules.
After midnight.
So a black man gets refused entry by a bouncer. Well, the black guy just happens to be a clerk for the local district court judge. And then Steve, he gets sued for racial discrimination. And according to Bruce, Steve never set out to become a nightclub owner. He wanted to be the next Hugh Hefner. And he told the doorman, you have to refuse black men entrance because he believed black men would scare away all the white women.
Oh, God.
They'd probably attract him.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
It's true. So the last podcast we did was big black dude.
Didn't bomb on that one.
Well,
But I bet you Steve
sure?
just grew up prejudiced against black people. Like, I'm sure in India where he grew up,
Yeah.
to my knowledge, there's not a lot of African Americans there.
Yeah.
So he probably his racism really sunk the club, at least the LA club.
It did. And this is when they lost their liquor license and they had to close the club down.
Which is the lifeblood.
Yeah, right.
I'm stating the obvious to you guys, but for you people who don't understand the club business, the booze. And because Sean Avery owned a bar in New York.
Yeah.
And he broke it down for me. Like, you're selling a whiskey shot for $10. The whole bottle of whiskey costs you maybe $60, but you're getting
16 pours.
Yeah. So, you're tripling your money on every bottle in there.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you lose your liquor license, one, it's very hard to get back.
Right.
And if you do get it back, you'll go bankrupt because I can only imagine how much it costs now. Back then, I think it was some backroom deals and,
Yeah.
like Eddie Nash from the Starwood.
Yeah. The Nash.
The Nash.
Don't fuck with the Nash.
Oh, dude, when I won't say the guest name, but on Inappropriate Earl, I brought Eddie Nash up, and the person shot me and looked like, I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, shit.
Like, he's still...
Where was he murdered?
Well, no, he died.
Oh, I thought he got murdered.
No. What happened was, and I know this has nothing to do with Chippendales, but John Holmes, the porn star,
Yeah.
he ripped Eddie Nash off
Right.
with those four guys.
Yeah.
So...
By the way, remember the guy, you'll get this actor, he's the one in that movie. He's like, you're telling me John Holmes was in the room? What was that guy's name?
Great Ted Levine.
Thank you. That's that was Ted Levine?
Bill Buffalo Bill from
I didn't
Sons of
know
the
that
Light.
was Ted Levine.
That's in Wonderland now,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
Boogie
yeah.
Nights. So Eddie Nash gets pissed. His bodyguard, Greg Dials, who was a 350-pound black dude who was like a karate champion, he sees John Holmes the next day randomly. I'm sure they all went to the same places with one of Eddie Nash's either bracelets or rings on.
Mm-hmm.
So they clearly knew who had done the robbery.
Oh, God.
So Eddie Nash makes John Holmes take Greg Dials and some of Greg Dials' hoods to the house where all the robbery people were, and that's where they killed him. And they made John Holmes put his hand in blood.
Yes.
So they knew he was there, so Eddie Nash could have something on him.
Yeah.
Now here's the crazy thing, and this is just LA history more than Chippendales. The lead detectives in the John Holmes murders were Tom Lang and Phil Van Adder,
which were the OJ guys.
You know, so
Yeah.
Wow.
there is a great YouTube video where they survey the actual Wonderland crime scene.
Yeah.
And it's with Phil Van Adder. And dude, even seasoned cops were like, I've never seen stuff.
Do you
like
think
this.
Holmes contributed and actually took a swing?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, he probably was, from what I understand about him, he was kind of a pussy.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that Gregory Dials and his accomplices did the murders. And then Nash told him, make sure there's a sign that John was there so we can have that over him.
Yeah.
Because I don't think John Holmes was in the system. He had not committed any. He had not been caught for any crimes.
I see.
So I think Nash was like, if you ever fuck me over, I'm gonna stay.
He just wanted
whose handprint that was.
Yeah. He wanted a get out of jail free card. He wanted blackmail.
Now you're 23 and me will get you busted.
All right. So back to the.
Did you hear that one? He got in a
23andMe joke?
Yeah.
All right. I didn't hear it,
Usually
but I'll
he
hear
has
it on
his headphones
playback.
on. Usually he has his headphones on.
Yeah.
So you won't hear it on playback because he mumbled it.
Okay. Well, then you know what? Can you just make a note and delete it?
Sure.
So none of us
No,
have to
leave
hear
it in.
Leave it in. Okay. So don't forget, at this point, they need to find a new club. They found a place on Wilshire. I don't recall where, but then they moved to Carlos and Charlie's. And that's
where I come
what
into
year
the
would that
story.
have been?
I mean,
90?
I was going there. Oh boy, this was fairly late into the 80s. It might have even been 90, because here's the thing about that intersection. We'll call it the Sunset Curve.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't an intersection. Across the street was Roxbury, which was the hottest nightclub in.
Is that where Miyagi's is now?
Yes. Well, no, it's where Pink Taco is.
Pink
now.
Taco. Oh yeah.
So,
okay, I see.
Amagi's. Later, Roxbury became Amagi's, but Roxbury was where like Shannon Doherty would go, Paris Hilton, and so it was the wildest. You could literally walk across the street to Carlos and Charlie's.
Yeah.
So it was just very economical on your gas mileage.
Yeah.
So it's hard to explain. You had to be there. Roxbury was just 3 levels of. Just the worst human behavior.
Dublin's was the first bar I went to in LA. And I remember walking in there and it was like, the place, 4 stories.
Yeah.
And it was just wall to wall women, good amount of guys too. But coming from New York at the time and seeing a bar that big and that crazy and packed, I was like, that was my first local place I would always go to.
Well, I would go to Roxbury on non-Carlos and Charlie nights in my sweatpants. And I would dry hump girls on the dance floor, and I'd come like a madman. And then,
back then, it was cool.
Yeah.
but it sounds insane to say that, but back then it was just like, believe me, there was a lot of guys in sweatpants on that dance floor.
Yeah.
And you'd shoot a load in your pants, and then you'd walk around with a huge wet spot because I always wear gray sweats.
Yeah.
So there'd be like a pool of load. It looked like my pants were camouflaged. And it was just, it's a different era. Like now you get kicked out of the club.
Yes.
Like,
Sure.
Dude, you can't walk around with that
Can't even-
stain on your pants.
Yeah.
Can come in with the
Back then, nobody
sweatpants.
cared.
Yeah.
Door guys were hooking up with chicks in the valet. Some guys Rolls Royce. I mean, it was literally the Wild West of sexual depravity.
Well, at this time, they started getting knockoff impersonators. Did you recall any of the knockoff Chippendales? Because this was the people that were getting firebombed, but they would pop up like roaches, they said.
I don't remember what it was called, but I know at the Marina Del Rey location of the Red Onion, it was called the Spread Onion.
Oh, so gross.
And they had exotic dancing there.
Yeah.
They popped up everywhere. They were literally like Starbucks. I mean, Chippendales obviously was the one everyone wanted to go to, but like if you didn't want to go to Sunset Strip, you'd be like, well, there's this place in the valley. It's got male dancers. Let's just same principle, but
Well, there was one group that actually did well, and it was Adonis, and they focused on this in the film. Do you remember Adonis?
I never went. But I drove by it several times. I mean, it was, but they got there a little late to the party. It did do well, but
Yeah.
I think by the time it started, that Chippendales or it kind of was like 80s metal in '92. Like it was
Yeah.
like still around, but the halcyon days are over.
Right. Well, it was a huge success. They pre-sold 200 shows. This is Adonis, 500,000 seats. And Steve finds out about this and loses his fucking mind. And according to Eric, the creative director, this is when he became bipolar and paranoid as well. He thinks most of the erratic behavior was driven by cocaine, which, come on, it's the 80s. That tracks, right? Eric says he would come in really clogged up and bitchy, and cocaine pushed him to a point where he didn't give a fuck. It became more of a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Paranoia Land. Now, I don't understand that reference. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride?
I think it was a Disneyland
Yeah.
ride, but
Okay.
Disneyland
you
ride.
see that with any rip-off shows, like it's just the original's the best, and then usually the first series competitor's pretty good,
Yeah.
but then it's very much like 80s metal, where you had Motley Crue and Rat,
Yeah.
Quiet Riot, and then a couple of years later you had copycat versions of those bands,
Yeah.
and then you got copycat versions of the copycat versions. I mean, male exotic dancing, it's not that
Right.
original of an idea. It's,
Yeah.
you can always get good-looking dudes. It's like strip clubs,
yeah.
There's one Crazy Girls on the Strip is the best strip club, but then you've got, L.A. You've got Deja Vu in the Valley, and they still have the best tagline of any business: thousands of pretty girls and 3 ugly ones. So, but I think the peak was the decline was starting to happen around this time. I mean, Adonis had a real quick run.
Yeah. Well, Reed Scott was a dancer with Adonis. And according to him, this is the end of episode 3. He says, this is when things got really interesting. Because in July of 1991, he's hired by them to MC a run of shows in Blackpool, England. And 2 performances into the new Adonis show, the producers wave him off stage. They're in the wings and they're like, come over here. We need to talk to you now. And meanwhile, he's like surrounded by a bunch of guys in fucking G-strings with their dicks hanging out. And he's like, now? And they're like, yes, now get off the stage. So he gets off stage and these 2 detectives say, hey, excuse me, we need to speak to you because 2 men have been sent from America to assassinate you. And that's how episode 3 ends. So episode 4 is titled Showtime. I think you could see where we're going here. And back to Reed Scott. He's in Blackpool, England, and the MC of the competing brand Adonis. And they show him on stage and he screams, how'd you like to come back with me for a little bareback riding?
Different era, dude. Just a different era.
The detectives grab him, they sit him down, and they say, this is serious, man. There's 2 people that have been hired to assassinate you. And he can't believe somebody would want to kill him. And more importantly, he has no idea why somebody would want to kill him, which tracks again. He's just an MC at Adonis. So according to him, he leaves the theater. He heads back to his flat, grabs the largest kitchen knife he can find, takes it into the shower with him, turns on the shower, and in mid-shampoo, the lights and the power go out.
Oh, fuck.
And he freezes. And he thinks he's about to die. Well, luckily, he didn't. So main titles come up, and we hear a voice that says, I was a mailwright in 1991. Worked outside construction, putting their machinery in plants. My job took me all over the United States, in some countries even. Now, I have no idea what a mailwright is. I watched this with closed captions. I Googled mailwright. I have no idea. If you know what the term is,
I
help me
don't.
out. Don't even bother Googling it. It's not even up there. So then we see another title that flashes up, and it says somewhere in the American Midwest. And the guy that was speaking, he's a scruffy old looking guy sitting in a cabin in the woods. And the titles say his name is Strawberry. So according to Strawberry, he says, I was in a job in LA when I met Ray Colon, and we got to be friends and drank beers together and just hung out. He told me one time he had to set a club on fire. Well, I thought it was BS and never took it seriously. But as time progressed, I realized this guy was involved in some very bad things. One night, I'm hanging out with Ray, and he says, I got a job for you. He told me these dancers would be appearing in Blackpool, England, and he wanted me to fly there and catch these people where there was a lot of people around and stick them with a needle with this poison. And then I was supposed to just ease out of the crowd and come home and collect $25,000 and live happily ever after. And I'm going, what, are you kidding me? And he said, you see these needles? There's cyanide in them. We're going to kill one of these guys and put the fear of God in them. So Strawberry, this guy, says that he thought Ray was joking. And then he soon realizes Ray's dead serious. And that's when he says, according to him, I knew I was in deep shit. He was also afraid that Ray might do something to him, and then he might even get stuck with the cyanide needle himself, because at this point he knows too much. So Strawberry decides to go along with this whole plan, because his plan is, I'm going to go along with this and then just ditch Ray whenever I find a place to ditch Ray. So he says, no problem, Ray, I'm in. So Strawberry gets in a car with Ray. They head to the airport. This is in LA. And his plan is to contact some authorities as soon as he can shake Ray. So they park at the airport, and, Strawberry's like, all right, Ray, I'll see you later. And Ray's like, oh, no, I'm going to walk you to the gate.
Yeah.
So he has to get on a plane and fly all the way to England. God. So at this point, he lands in London. He heads to the restroom. He has the cyanide needles on him. Wow. They're full of cyanide. He dumps them in the trash can. He's like, I'll go to the cops. I'll tell them what happened. And he's like, wait a minute. No one's going to believe this crazy story that I was hired to kill male exotic dancers with cyanide. So what does he do? He turns around, gets on another plane, and heads right to Vegas, because he said, I knew of an FBI field office in Vegas. So again, this is when we're reintroduced to Scott Garriola, who was the FBI agent at the beginning of the first episode. And Strawberry is a cooperating witness, and he says, though this story's crazy, we hear shit like this all the time. We got to take it seriously. So Strawberry goes undercover for the FBI to try and get Ray to admit his involvement in the plot. So they have these recordings of Strawberry and Ray Ray's on the phone, and he calls Strawberry up, and he says, or no, Strawberry calls Ray, excuse me, and he says, hey, Ray, are you sure this stuff is going to work? It looks red. And Ray says, yeah, don't worry about it. It'll work. So Strawberry's response is, well, I sure hope it does, and kills them right away, because I don't want to be stuck with any of this shit. So Ray, this is when Ray says, hit him with a hammer on the you-know-what, and then go for his head. So Strawberry does his job. They get what they need on tape for the FBI, so they flip Ray. But of course, they want to get to whoever's at the top of this whole thing. So Garriola says Strawberry's a pro. We have the evidence. Now, this is interesting. They ask the FBI agent, they say, do you think that Strawberry was actually going to kill? And he says, whether or not he intended to intentionally kill the man is open for debate. He believes Strawberry was probably going to kill somebody, and then he got cold feet, and he wanted to make sure he wasn't going to go down for conspiracy as well, and that's why he went to the FBI. But it's never clear if Strawberry was intentionally going to do this, because this is a story that he fed to the FBI. Yeah. So who knows? Maybe he fucking lost the needles, or they broke, or whatever, and he's just trying to cover his ass. We don't know. So they put him in the witness relocation program.
Wow.
So the FBI raids Ray's house, and they find a bag with skull and crossbones on it with a jar of cyanide inside of it. Right.
Come on.
It's like, here's
Looney
the treasure
Tunes.
map.
It's fucking Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
It's in an Acme box.
It's fucking Goonies shit. So Cologne is arrested.
Doubloons.
Cologne's arrested, and bond is set at $100K, and he can't even bond out at $100K. So back to Reed Scott, who spells his name like read a book, which I still think is funny. He's fucking crushed. I mean, he's emotional and he's pissed that somebody would want to kill him and his life was only worth $25,000, which was probably overvalued in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a fucking MC at Adonis. So Cologne's cooperating. He admits he was involved in another murder for hire plot. So he also admits that he did burn down clubs in Los Angeles. He also claims that he was part of the murder conspiracy that killed Nick DeNoia. And of course, he says the person that hired him to do all this was Steve Banerjee.
Right.
So the feds have tons of shit they're dealing with. They've got an old murder, they got arson, and then they got to worry about these two MCs at Adonis that are being threatened with murder. But the prosecutor says this isn't going to be an easy case because they essentially have to catch a tiger by the tail and they have a dirty informant in Ray Cologne. So next, they pull the arson investigations from the LAFD and the LAPD, and everything matches up to what Ray said he did with these crimes. Then they get into the Nick DeNoia murder. Cologne hired a man that was named Louis, and he paid him $25,000 to kill Nick. And according to the corroboration, they both took a flight from LA to New York. Then Louis took the elevator up to the 15th floor, pulled the gun out on Nick, and the feds compare their notes with the NYPD, and everything matches up. So now they have to figure out who the fuck this Louis guy is and then connect him to Banerjee. So they have everything they need on tape. They determined Louis' real name is Gilberto Lopez Riviera. Now, the problem is this guy's locked up in jail in California on a narcotics charge at the time. So they're like, how the fuck are we going to get this guy to admit that he was involved in these murders? Because obviously he wants out of jail. So they wire Ray up. They send him in. And they come up with an excuse that Gilbert left a living witness. That was the guy who said, I'm not Nick DeNoia. He's down the hall. And that guy is blackmailing Ray's boss. So they get Rivera to admit that he did shoot Nick. And they corroborate this because he tells him exactly where the bullet went into Nick's brain, which I thought was, some pretty specific detecting. But according to the prosecutor, this still isn't enough evidence to get Steve for conspiracy. So the feds are trying to get Ray and Steve in LA in the same room and wire it up. But Steve knows something's going on and he won't get near Ray. So they run out of alternatives. So finally, they have Ray ambush Steve, and he's on the street and he says, you got to help me. I need money. I need it for lawyers, etc. They're on to me. And Steve's just like, I don't know who the fuck you are. Right. He's just like, who the fuck is this guy? Well, Steve agrees to pay Ray money. None of this is on tape. They're being surveilled by the FBI. But he pays Ray via dead drop at a restaurant. So they still can't make any connections. So the FBI is getting really frustrated at this point.
What year is this specifically that this is going on?
This would have been early 90s.
Okay.
91, 92. Does that sound right? So.
Yes.
Thank you, Earl.
So then they track Ray to a Santa Monica hotel where he meets up with Steve. And Steve gives him another $40,000, but not directly. It's a dead drop situation.
What do you mean by dead drop? Explain that to the fans.
Meaning he says, here's where your money will be, but I'm not going to be there when you meet it. So I'm not technically directly connected to the money.
Okay.
So
a lot of times trash cans or something like that.
A rock, whatever.
Under the bench.
But the point is he's not physically handing it off to him. So there's plausible deniability if he gets popped, if he were in court. And not only that, they can't get any recordings. This is all communicated when Ray met, what's his name, at the Santa Monica hotel, when he met Steve, he was communicating with notes. They were writing shit back and forth to each other. And of course, destroying the notes.
Yeah.
So the FBI still can't figure out how to fucking get Steve. So they come up with a plan to let Ray bond out or escape. The documentary didn't go into the terms of how Ray got out, but they theorize if they can get Ray to another foreign country and meet Steve, then Steve will be willing to talk. Because keep in mind, Steve wants to know what Ray knows because he's worried about his own personal safety. So they say it's a risky move because they could get Ray to another country and then he could go seek asylum or, just disappear. So it's risky to say the least. So they send Ray to Rome and they wire him up an apartment there. Then, the FBI, it's a classic movie scene. They're on the other side of the wall and they're waiting for Steve to show up. So they call Steve and Steve's like, where are you? And Ray's like, I'm in Rome. And then Steve's like, I don't have a visa. I can't get into Rome. And the FBI is dumbfounded at this point. And then they realize Steve wasn't even a naturalized citizen. So this whole time he's been working for Chippendales, he wasn't a U.S. citizen.
Wow.
Right.
Was he paying taxes though?
Of course.
That's
you can
all
still
they
pay
care
taxes.
about.
Yeah, of course. That is all they care about.
Yeah, even if you're doing illegal shit, they really don't care.
Right. So they ultimately end up on a meeting point in Zurich. So they get to Zurich, but again, Steve won't go near Ray to the hotel. He's like, I'm down here at the bar, come meet me. And Ray's like, will you quit fucking around? I moved to another country. You got to come see me. Well, Steve still won't take the bait. He wants the meeting on his terms. So they wire Ray up and they put the recorder in his jacket.
Yeah.
And they're like, go meet him.
Come
So
to
he
my
meets
jacuzzi.
him at a coffee shop.
Okay.
And then they play the recording. They can't hear anything because Ray took his jacket off.
Oh, God.
They're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah.
So at this point, they have to scramble because they only have one opportunity to make this bust and get the information. So they send in a fake Swiss police officer into the restaurant to say you have to shut the whole restaurant down immediately. So what do they do?
Subtle.
They go down the road to another place. It's a bar. It's loud.
Yeah.
They can't hear anything. So
does he have? I don't know if to get too specific. Does he have his jacket on him?
it's sitting next to him.
He just can't hear shit because
it's not on him. Like they told him to wear it.
Right.
So maybe he's an accessory. But go on.
It was a little shady.
Yeah.
It's like you've got this one job to do. Don't
Right.
fuck it up.
Right,
It's
right.
like me talking to you about your one job on this podcast, and you just keep fucking it up.
He's killing it.
So anyway,
I'm doing great.
He's made this long podcast longer.
Yeah.
so he finally talks Steve into coming back to his hotel room. The FBI gets there seconds before. They wire everything up, and Steve spills the beans. And he says the only reason he hasn't been arrested is the FBI can't prove that he gave Ray the money, or he gave Ray the gun, or he gave Ray the address, or he gave Ray any information to track down Nick and kill him. So they get everything. Steve finally was comfortable enough to shoot his mouth off. So this is 93. Steve is arrested and charged with murder for hire, racketeering, and arson on a RICO charge. I mean, he's fucked.
Yeah.
So he's denied bail, and he says, my only thing I can do now is plead guilty, and he's facing 26 years in prison.
Wow.
So Ray pleads guilty to conspiracy and murder for hire, and he got a 25-year sentence. Now, because he cooperated with the feds, they bring it down to 2.5 years.
Huh.
So the trigger man, Gilberto, he gets 25 to life. Now, Adonis shortly goes out of business immediately after.
Yeah, that was just really the 80s metal scene was very, it's funny that the timeline is so parallel to the 80s scene.
The grunge.
93, just no one wanted to see male exotic dancers anymore. It had a nice run.
Yep.
It was the perfect era in the 80s, but, the mid-90s, it was, the 80s was all about excess, whereas the 90s coming in with Clinton and, the bad economy and, grunge, all the the 80s action movies were kind of bombing in the early 90s.
Last Action Hero.
Yeah, that was the
gosh.
start, but you didn't have movies like Cobra or Raw Deal or Over the Top,
Wow.
So it was just the 90s were a very dark depressing time to follow probably the most exciting decade ever.
Yeah.
In terms of decadence and pussy and dick
fashion and style.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally went into the dark age when we put our flannels on to a degree. You know what I mean? And I was a part of that.
But the 80s metal bands were. You had like Warrant, who was like one of the glammier bands in the history of that genre, showing up in flannel shirts and their instead of like the,
Wait, Warrant tried to cross over?
Oh, 100%.
I didn't know that.
They were actually pretty good as a band, but it just was too late. I mean, Rat, Piercy, Rat had broken up, so Piercy did a like industrial metal. Like but that's what he kind of loved, but that's another podcast. But the 90s were just...
I'm sure Josh Adam Myers would love to talk about.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd love to talk. I can't really help him, so he probably doesn't want to talk to me. But, you know, this business is out of control. So, I mean, you got these fucking people talking about Gallagher dying.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I loved him. You know, 2 weeks ago, you tell me how bad he smelled, and he was trying to mooch weed off of you.
Yeah, that was a huge thing on Facebook. Everybody was saying how bad he smelled.
Well, it's like, you know, there was a comic. She was a manager, not a comic, named Cassie Dang.
Yeah.
Now, I got along with Cassie. She, unfortunately, passed away last week.
She was a manager?
Who knows, dude?
Yeah,
Who knows?
exactly. I thought she was just a comedy fan.
Who knows? But like everyone now is devastated she died, and it's like, dude, like I loved her, but she was pretty annoying. You know, so
She OD'd, right?
you know, I don't know. Who knows?
Wow. Wait, was she? Where was she working?
I don't know. What am I, her manager? What am I, the manager's manager?
Fuck me. All right. Back to the show.
So the 90s was just, you know, to have even though Thunder from Down Under is very popular to this day, I guess.
Yeah.
There'll always be a small sliver of pie for horny women to look at these great beefcakes.
Right, and that's where it is now. It's in Vegas. That's the last bastion of the Chippendales franchise.
Because you have those white trash tourists who, you know, they're probably from Nebraska or Omaha, and they don't see guys who look like, you know, American gladiators and you know, good-looking beefcakes, and you know, they see Tom Osborne, the coach of the football team, who's like looks like Yoda. So it's I could, you know. It's not surprising that it's in Vegas doing well. Still.
Yeah. Well, here's the good or bad news, depending on which side you're on. On October 24th, 1994, while awaiting sentence, Banerjee hanged himself in jail.
Good for him.
Whoa.
Yep.
Epstein style?
No, I think it's safe to say this was
guy,
a solo mission. He had
he
no
meant
other
it.
place to go.
Yeah.
When you get popped for conspiracy to commit murder and arson, you're not looking at much of a life after that.
Well, he's probably a loser and had no self-esteem.
But he's making
Roast battler.
making tens of millions of dollars. At what point is it not enough to just say, I won? I'm an Indian immigrant. This is enough for me to be happy.
Yeah, but he was probably in the mindset, no one likes me because of me. They just like me because, you know, I have cocaine and whores.
Hey, you know what?
Me.
That's still not a bad place to be.
But like, if you're in a good headspace, it is. If you're confident, you clearly saw that audition interview tape.
Yeah.
He was not a confident person.
It was pretty rough.
So I could see him being like, "Fuck, it's over, Johnny."
Well, how do you feel about a little bit of where are they now?
100%. I mean,
yes.
So
My favorite
let's
part.
start with Michael Rapp. He, of course, was, what was it, The Ultimate Man?
yes.
Yeah, his 5-minute starring show, the biggest part of the show. Well, he danced until
I wish
2000.
I had 5 minutes.
What's that?
I wish I had 5 minutes.
I wish you had 2.
He continued to dance until 2001. And according to him, after 20 years and working every job at Chippendales, he hung up his G-string.
Well, there's a shelf life to those. I think, you know, definitely with female models, you know, once they're 25, they're done, which is insane.
Yeah.
But with men, you know, it's kind of the same timeline, you know. Like he's a good-looking guy in the doc. You
Yeah.
can tell he's wearing Spanx. Like
But he's in his mid-60s, right?
Oh yeah, I mean I'm 54. I look
Yeah.
good for 54, but I couldn't have the body of a 24-year-old. So
Yeah.
it's it had to be a weird thing for those guys to be like total beefcake rock stars, but then when the next wave of younger guys starts coming around, what are you going to do? You've spent your whole life making money on your body and your face.
Yeah.
And now you're a little smaller, maybe you got love handles like or whatever, like you have no job skills other than you're swinging your dick around. So you probably get into escorting.
It's weird because they interviewed him and they said, "Do you have any regrets?" And he said, "Absolutely none." And I'm thinking to myself, you have no regrets that you lost your wife and a marriage with, your son because you did coke and bang pussy every night? I think I might have one regret.
Yeah, but you'd probably, I'm not saying you, but in his case, the guy was a rock star. He fucked probably hundreds, probably over 1,000 women.
How do you dodge AIDS with that amount of sex he was having?
Some guys just...
Wait, guys can't get it, right? If they're straight?
Yeah. Well,
Take a look at it.
Aldo's the patient zero. Like, how does Aldo not have any diseases? But, like, some guys are just lucky,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm probably a little lucky. Not that I put myself on having sex with that amount of women, but, like, I mean, I think it's hard, from what I understand, for straight men to get it through straight sex.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, obviously, but I think the odds are stacked in your favor.
Yeah.
They say monkeypox is one of the main sources of transmission is through gay or bisexual sex.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a pure straight man, unless you have a cut on your dick and, the woman has an infected, pussy, basically, that, it's going to be pretty hard for a straight man to get it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and maybe these guys have herpes and they're like, that's just part of the game. But I mean, even the thought of having herpes for me, it's like a deal breaker.
But they say everyone has herpes.
No, they say 25% of people have herpes.
But I mean, we all have had a mouth sore, canker sore.
Yeah. That's you're talking about simplex 2.
But that's herpes and to some form.
Wait, can you get, like, let's say if she has
1 and 2, you can't get one.
Let's say if she doesn't have a cut on it. This is going to be fun.
I doubt that.
She does not have
Based
a cut.
on the last 3 hours, I would say this is not going to be fun.
She does not have a cut on her vagina, but you have
she doesn't have to have it.
No, I'm just saying, but if you have a herpes sore and you're giving her oral pleasure, can you give her at least
you can get it.
The topical herpes?
No, topical and vaginal or genital are two different things.
But if you're going down on a girl and she has genital herpes,
oh, that's bad.
You're gonna get it. You have a chance to get it.
Sure.
There's my friend who I did the Freddie Mercury story with. I mean, clearly Freddie Mercury died of AIDS.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey, I believe, said it was unprotected sex.
Yeah.
It was the best way he told me. Like, we're just going over his career and cabaret singing, and he just looks at me on my couch and goes, I fucked Freddie Mercury. I'm like, I didn't, but we're going to talk about it for about the next hour. So in regards to how he didn't get AIDS, or at the minimum, some guys and women, you're just lucky.
Well, I forgot to add this. I want to add this. At the height of its success, Chippendales grossed an estimated $35 million a year. I mean, think about that kind of money in the 80s. You got to at least double, triple it by now.
If you think about the booze that they were selling, 2-drink minimum.
Yep.
At the Overland Venice location, which, what did you say? It sat 200 people?
299.
So they probably had 400 people in there.
Yeah.
Even if, say, 100 got in for free, they're still drinking. That's, if you have a successful bar, and I learned this from Sean Avery, the money you can make is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, like you said, you're selling 60 drinks out of a bottle of whiskey.
Yeah.
Or pours.
16.
Well, I mean, yeah, and a 16-ounce bottle or 24, you're getting about 20 pours out of that. so everything after the 10th pour is pure profit.
Yeah.
Like it's literally pure profit. A beer that a Bud Light's $8 in most bars that costs the bar $2.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of bars out there, so you have to come up with a concept, and
happening spot.
a lot of bars go out of business. I would love to own a gay bar in my neighborhood. That bar, Mickey's. Oh
Mickey's is still going. Rage is gone, right?
Rage is now Lance Bass's Club Heart.
I went into Rage one night with a buddy of mine. We were trying to get cocaine, and he goes, "Hey, if I need to be convincing and make out with this dude to score us cocaine, just go with me on it, but it doesn't make me gay." And I was like, "Hey, just get the cocaine. I don't need any stories."
Oh, there's so much drugs in the gay community, because I live on probably the gayest street in the world, Larrabee. Like it's
It
literally,
even sounds gay.
Yeah.
it's ground zero for homosexual activity, and the bars. I would have no shame being a straight man owning a gay bar.
Hamburger Mary's.
Hamburger Mary's is popular. Rage or Heart now is relatively popular. Rocco's, which is across the street, always packed. I mean, Mickey's is the benchmark. I mean, that is, you could have another 9/11.
That's ground zero.
Oh, it's
More like pound zero.
hello.
Come
That's
on,
pretty good.
that was
dude.
good.
Jesus Christ.
You
Three-
got one.
3 fucking hours.
Put it on Put it on the reel.
But like, I can't imagine how much money, or the place next to it. It's they're kind of cool. It's a niche.
Niche.
Right. Depending where you're from, Baja Cantina.
Yeah.
So it's like a Hispanic. It's not necessarily a gay bar, but it's definitely different than Mickey's or the Revolver. It's packed every night. So I would love to own a bar.
Well, we should talk about that.
I'm
looking for a retirement plan because this podcast ain't it.
Well, now with your sidekick here.
Let me know if you need a promoter.
Back to Michael. He's happy now, according to him. I went off the doc to find this information, but this is current. He since remarried a woman named Yolanda, 15 years his junior. I mean, come on. What's that put her at, like 40?
Regular old Dane Cook.
Hey,
No,
I
50.
I can't hate on Dane Cook. When I was 47, I dated a 19-year-old, so I think you know her too.
I do.
Boy,
Yep.
she left quite an impression on me and my mattress.
See how we
she
did
weighed
the
that
joke?
much? Jesus.
See how we worked the joke? He knew the punchline was coming
Yes.
because he's a professional.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
anyway.
she was cool, actually.
Yes.
We had a falling out.
Well,
Sorry.
she was a fan of his. So he used his, D-list celebrity, whatever you want to call it, to the max. He says he met her on MySpace, found out that she had a picture of him on his wall, and now they live together in Scottsdale, Arizona, where they own a women's boutique, and he also works as a fitness trainer. I checked his IMDb. I was curious. You were the 80s master, if you'd heard of any of these titles. Do you recall a film by the name of Tall, Dark, and Handsome in 1987?
No, there was only really one movie, because I know what kind of films this guy was in, and Brett Baxter Clark was in it, and it was filmed right down the street from my childhood home. It's called Malibu Express,
Okay.
and it's the ultimate sexploitation. It's just every chick in it has huge tits, and Sybil Danning was like the lead bad girl, and she's like the queen of sexploitation movies. And my Facebook buddy Darby Hinton, he was the good. He was like the detective. The movie was so bad. It was literally just, let's get 10 chicks with huge tits, and Darby Hinton was a very good looking guy, and so he did movies like that.
What about Muscle Motion, 1983? Do you remember that one?
No.
Okay. I'm going to go through Roger Menash's credits because I guarantee you're going to know one of them. Just Can't Get Enough, 2002. He played the featured waiter.
No,
Okay. How about Ladies Night, 1983?
I mean, it sounds familiar, but I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Mom, 1983. He played a
Oh,
male
just thinking
dancer.
about that.
I had
That was Mr. Mom the one with Arnold?
Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton.
Oh, Michael.
I had my very
Keaton
first
was
kiss to that movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
About
Jennifer,
220, 221?
Jennifer Molina.
Okay.
It was at the Man Bruin Theater. It was.
Jesus, you had a late kiss. I was 8 in 1983. When did you first
I mean,
kiss a girl?
I had a kiss in the 8th grade, but like the first like French kiss.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was.
She laid it down.
So you were like
Tongue.
26.
No, I was. How old was I? 83. So 15. Jenny Molina
Jenny, shout out.
at the Man. We still keep in touch.
Oh.
Who else was in that
Nice.
movie?
I don't have to
Michael
bleep it out.
Keaton,
Yep.
and Jillian.
Gar.
I want to say Martin Mull.
Martin Mull. He was the bad guy.
So I had
Terry
the-
Gar.
Yes, right, and yeah, I mean, I have a special spot in my heart for that movie.
Yeah, it's a classic. Perfect. You referenced this film earlier. If I recall, that was John Travolta, and I can't remember who the woman
Well, I
was.
can tell you the whole cast. It was John Travolta, Jamie Lee Curtis, Mary Lou Henner, my buddy Matt Reed, who was a private trainer. He played like one of the door guys.
Was his last name spelled R-E-A?
I don't remember, but it was filmed at two gyms. I worked at both. The main location was on the Sports Connection on Ocean Park and 31st.
Oh, shit.
Santa Monica. And then they did like the main aerobic
Remember
scenes
Sports Connection.
in what was the Sports Connection in West Hollywood. So it was a chain gym that was owned by Mike Talla and Nanette Pate Francini. They later started the Sports Club LA.
Okay.
Oh, and then
Which is that
somebody made a comedy
giant-
special
Yeah.
about it.
Giant gym on Equinox.
Yeah.
And they were in the movie as the gym owners. It's a great guilty pleasure. I mean, it's a horrific movie.
Is it worse than Staying Alive?
Well, I love Staying Alive because Stallone directed it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
But that movie's often referred to as one of the worst movies of the 80s.
maybe the only other movie that's as bad as perfect in terms of the concept is Aspen Extreme, which was about the two ski instructors who are pussy hounds. Pete Berg later became a huge
Peter
director.
Berg was in that?
Yeah, he played Dexter Witecki.
Oh, wow.
And
Is this close to Hot Dog?
it makes Hot Dog look like Wuthering Heights. And it's funny, the main woman in Aspen Extreme was Finola Hughes. So years later, I'm on some E! show where Rosie Tran is getting a makeover. And I remember she called me and Yoshi Obayashi,
Legend.
who has the best gay joke I've ever heard, which was, I don't understand people being gay. Like, how bad does a pussy have to smell for you to want ash? You know what I'm saying? I saw him one night opening up for Russell Peters. He did that joke at the Wiltern, and it was packed. I mean,
Yeah.
it was standing room only at the Wiltern. And the Wiltern is no seats. It's
Yeah,
just like-
standing room.
So it's when it's
One of my
standing room
favorite-
only, it's really packed. And Yoshi was so nervous he did that joke 2 times in a row.
Oh.
Like he did the joke, got a big laugh, and they started it again.
I worked with him in Phoenix a couple years ago, and he was just a crusher. I mean, he's
he's
just-
great. Like,
his act is just so tight.
but him and like Jason Rouse are
Yeah.
you can't follow them because they're so. So
One more movie. He was in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and playing Khan's crewman number 7.
Ricardo Montalban and
I worked for him years ago.
oh really?
Yeah, when I first got to LA, when I was moving gym equipment, and I went up to his house, and he had me move a gym, and I remember lifting it up, and it was just full of white maggots, just crawling under, and it immediately made me think of the Wrath of Khan because they put that maggot thing in that guy's ear in the beginning of
Oh,
Khan
right.
2, but it was so creepy. But he was a nice guy.
I'm not. I don't know. Is the beautiful Indian actress I think was in that Star Trek. Her name's Persis Kambata. She was in Stallone's movie as the female terrorist Nighthawks in the movie Nighthawks.
Yeah, which is a great movie with Rutger Hauer.
Yes, and it's a great back. This has nothing to do with Chippendales.
But it's the 80s, so keep going.
I read Rutger Hauer's biography, and
Did you get a signed copy?
I did, actually, from Book Soup.
Yeah, of course.
So I always thought movies were somewhat shot in sequence, which is insane to think now, knowing what I know about the business now. But in the movie Nighthawks, the first scene they ever shot was the ending. So when Stallone, who's in drag, Rutger Hauer thinks it's his wife, and then Stallone takes off the wig and he kills Rutger Hauer. That was the first scene they shot, and apparently to get the effect of Rutger Hauer being shot, they had like a wire hooked up to his back, and Rutger Hauer was told the wire set at like 2 or 3, so it'll jerk you back a little bit, and then you let your acting take over. Stallone told the stunt guy,
Jacket to Dine.
turn it to 10.
Oh shit!
So if you watch the end of Nighthawks, I'm sorry if I ruined it. I figure in 2022, if you haven't seen the movie, you're probably not going to see it.
This show is technically a spoiler alert,
we're
so
gonna
don't
get
feel
it.
like you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally 40 years old.
Yeah.
It was 81, so it's 41 years old. So apparently the whole rest of the movie, and if you watch the movie, you could see tension, like real tension between
shit.
Stallone and Rutger Hauer.
No.
Rutger Hauer
Wow.
said he did everything humanly possible. If they had a chase scene, he would outrun Stallone, and Stallone got pissed, and it is a very competitive set.
Wow.
And it was a wild set because I think Stallone had fired the director like the second day of shooting. I forget the reason why. So then Stallone started to direct the movie. And at that time, according to SAG rules, it was illegal for the lead actor to also direct the movie for safety issues. So then they had to get another director. And so the movie is a great movie, in my opinion, but it's a little, you can see why it's a little disjointed.
Do you see in the movie like he gets jerked back pretty hard?
Yeah, like I just said 5 minutes ago.
Shit, okay.
Perfect timing, Dave. Richard Barsh, the original MC at Chippendales, the one that followed Paul Snider. He was cast as an MC in 2 roles, one in the TV show Chips.
I love Chips.
And also in a movie called For Ladies Only. You ever hear of that?
I have. I don't remember anything about it, but real fast, one time I walk into Best Buy on Sawtelle and Peak. No, I'm sorry. It was the one on La Brea and Santa Monica. And I hadn't been there yet. I'd always gone to the one on Sawtelle and Pico. And so I go in there, and there's this pretty big Mexican dude in a blue shirt. And I tap him on the shoulder, and before he turned around, I'm like, hey, do you know where the CDs are? And it was Eric Estrada.
It was Estrada.
Oh, shit.
And he actually showed me where the CDs
Oh, shit.
Like, he had a good sense of humor.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Sandra Theodore. Of course, she was the playmate that was introduced in the beginning of episode 1. She talked about going all the time. She had a nice career. She was on the Bob Newhart show, played girl number 1. She was also on Chips and in an episode she played Marsha. She did a stint on Fantasy Island. 3 on a Date as model number 2. Now, this movie I thought you might have heard of because I have not. It was called Skateboard, released in 1978. You ever hear of it?
Yeah, but I don't. There was a movie that came out that same year called Roller Boogie with Linda Blair and Jim Bray, who I thought was going to be a star.
Jim Bray?
Yeah, just good-looking guy.
Yeah.
Like, it's like Michael Beck from The Warriors. I thought this guy's. And they just it's such a weird business how some people make it, some don't.
I wonder if there's a documentary about like the movies that came out just because there was a movie coming out on this exact topic, like what you're saying, like try to beat them to
I think
market or whatever.
The most famous situation of that was in 1989. There was 3 underwater movies.
Oh shit!
Deep Space 6,
Leviathan,
with Peter Weller, and there was a third one, The Abyss.
Oh yeah,
which is a
Kubrick.
brilliant film.
Isn't that
No.
James Cameron.
James Cameron. Man.
And it was. I remember going to see all 3, and it was like literally in like 1 month. It was like one. I'm a Peter Weller guy who I also met at that same Best Buy I'm not Eric Estrada. Dude, he's like, obviously RoboCop means a lot to me,
Yeah.
even though he was not the original choice for RoboCop.
Who was?
The great Michael Ironside.
Oh yeah, legend.
But this shows you the wackiness of the business. Michael Ironside, I don't know if I'd say he was fired, but he was let go because the outfit didn't fit him.
Of course,
I mean, literally,
something that's stupid.
Peter Weller got hired because the outfit fit him.
Yeah, don't just go adjust the outfit for a great actor.
I think, yeah, 100%. I think my favorite example of that is the original Engelbert from Bad News Bears was fired from the sequel for losing weight.
Ugh.
Oh shit.
Because in the first movie, it's the funniest line in the movie where they're watching Walter Matthau clean the pool. And Walter Matthau's like, "Don't jump in the pool, Engelbert. You might flood the valley." And it's just like, and then, so that's insane. Like, you wonder why this business drives people to suicide.
Yeah.
That kid was literally told, "Hey, you look great. You lost weight. Sorry, you're fired."
Yep.
What about Stingray? Because that was, I think, her biggest hit, and it was 1978. You ever hear of Stingray?
I've heard of it, but I don't. I was only 10 at the time, so I wasn't really watching TNA movies. I mean, 78, I'm trying to think of my two favorite movies from 78 would be Convoy with Chris Christopherson and Ali McGraw, and Big Wednesday, ironically enough, which is a surf movie, and I don't surf.
Yeah.
Never have.
I recently rewatched the Christopherson Streisand Star is Born.
Oh,
I
yeah.
loved it. It's so good.
But Big Wednesday, real fast, the story about Big Wednesday is...
How do you remember the date, like the years?
Well, I mean, I'm
Do you remember where
familiar.
it was?
Yeah, I mean, that's
I
from
guess
not
that's
drinking.
all. That's also.
Yeah,
That's true. The non-drinking is also.
he does
great,
the
but-
opposite of what you do with your jokes.
But no, like also too, it's like you have. There was maybe pace was a little bit slower, so you remembered all the little things.
But I mean, I do. I can remember seeing Big Wednesday at the Man National in Westwood, which is now, I think, condos. And I was in the theater alone. And I remember going, not knowing anything about the business or box office, like, this can't be a good sign.
Yeah.
But the story with Big Wednesday is made by the great, legendary writer and director John Milius,
Oh, legend.
who ghost wrote
The scene in Jaws.
that and Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Him, Spielberg, and George Lucas all went to USC,
Yep.
a film school, and they all say Milius was the more talented one.
Yeah.
And so they had a deal that they all would trade points on their next movie.
Keep
I
it
think
fair.
They graduated in the early to mid 70s. So Spielberg's movie was Close
Oh,
Encounters. Lucas's was first Star Wars, and Milius's was Big Wednesday.
Wow, I didn't know about Big Wednesday.
It's prime Jan Michael Vincent,
Yeah.
like the Brad Pitt of his generation.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm straight as you can get, but god damn, was he
Everybody
good-looking.
wanted to be him. Yeah, I remember hearing the early stories about Vincent.
Well, then I met him at the King Games in the 80s when he would sit next to me and just like wow, dude, it was such a bummer to see such a perfect example of male perfection, and then see him it looked like he swallowed two hams and they just lodged in his cheekbones.
Yeah.
But prime Gary Busey.
Oh yeah.
Sam Melville, who most people who are younger than me won't know, but he was in that ABC show The Rookies. He played like it's kind of a Star Wars vibe. Like Sam Melville was the Yoda surf guru, and the whole theme of the movie is Big Wednesday is that one final. I forget the reason they call it Big Wednesday, but it's when every 50 years.
It's a 50-year storm.
Yeah.
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 I forget what Wednesday.
finger of
I think
God,
it happens
man.
on Wednesday. I like some weird.
Yeah.
And Jerry Lopez.
Big Kahuna.
It's funny if you look at the back of my hoodie, and I'll show it to you when we're done. I don't want to accuse Aviator Nation of stealing, but their main logo, it's that high-end surf, hippie surf clothing line. It's Jerry Lopez's lightning bolt.
Oh, no shit.
Not that Jerry Lopez owns the lightning bolt logo, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, if that was Gene Simmons, he would have trademarked the lightning logo. Gene Simmons trademarked the $.
No shit.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do that?
He did
How do you
it.
trademark the $? If it belongs to the U.S. government?
He did it. So any rapper that had a logo of
The $, like the stand,
right?
the stamp, yeah.
The,
wow.
So shout out to Jerry Lopez.
Crazy.
So that's just a wacky story about big stuff.
So
That's a great bar fact right there.
Well, I also am a big fan of the surf. It's weird. Two of my favorite movies are surfing related. The North Shore
and Point Break.
Point Break, yeah, 100%. Well,
it's a perfect film in my opinion.
I mean, it's 80s cheese. It's a little silly. I don't know if I would say the movie holds up.
Oh, it definitely does.
Well, it's certainly better than I
didn't bother.
The remake. Yeah. It was tough, but
what about Surf Ninjas?
Prime Swayze, Prime Keanu, Gary Busey.
One of the best action scenes of all time. Steady cam shots. That chase scene. Catherine Bigelow. I mean, that she's a star. It took a long time for people to recognize that greatness, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's an innovative movie. Of course, Rat had the closing. That's when I knew Rat was kind of coming to an end, because in the video for Nobody Writes for Free, they were wearing like board shorts and jeans.
Back off, War Child.
Yeah. I mean, Anthony Kiedis. It's so John McGinley, great,
amazing.
He's good.
He's like always has the scene stealers. Platoon.
Oh yeah,
Wall Street.
Wall Street.
Yeah.
I think he's the modern day, or maybe the slightly younger version of Gene Hackman. He's just good in everything.
Yeah.
But North Shore is a great movie. I had Turtle from North Shore on my podcast. I've never been so starstruck in my life.
I want to talk a little bit about some recent information Sandra Theodore dropped. I didn't see the documentary. Maybe we'll cover it on here, but Secrets of Playboy, did you see it at all?
Yeah, definitely doesn't paint Hugh Hefner in a good light.
Well, here's some gems for her interview. According to her, she said he would tell the public even good girls enjoy sex, healthy sex, and there was nothing healthy about the sex that Hefner had because he took it too far. She also claimed that Hefner would make her get him drugs. And then I also read somewhere that he took a hit of acid every night while they were together for a long time. She also recalls that he was into bestiality. Did you hear about this?
Whoa.
I haven't. It wouldn't surprise me. Like I said, I went to the Playboy Mansion twice. It's a pretty, looking back, like I can separate myself from the sheer awesomeness.
Here's a direct quote.
Pretty scummy guy.
Here's a direct quote. I walked in once and he was with our dog. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, dogs have needs." And I went, quote, "Stop that. Just stop that." And after that, I never left him alone with the dog again. I couldn't believe what I was saying. So my question is, was he jerking off the dog or was he sucking the dog off?
See, I don't believe that.
Was it a dog female or a male?
Because that seems like an unnecessary pylon. I mean, listen, I don't know. It could be true. Like, there's some
let me continue.
freaks out there.
Here's another quote. She says Hefner required her to have sex with other women and men when he filmed and directed them. According to her, she says, this information is so disturbing and so disgusting. I'm sick to my stomach and could cry hearing about this stuff. Hugh Hefner was disgusting and a terrible person. I will never think otherwise. She alleges it was when Hefner became infatuated with blood and snuff films that she finally gathered the courage to walk away and leave him. What kind of mind is so far gone that it takes killing somebody to get them excited for that big release? Wow. I never heard any of this stuff before.
I mean, I can't say I was around his inner circle a lot, but
dude, I was only there once and I was working.
I mean, the 2 times I was there, it was. You'd think as a guy, you'd be like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest place on planet Earth. It's all pussy, or mostly all pussy." But it's like there was a creepiness about it. Like it was a lot of older dudes, and not that listen, I'm 54. Who doesn't like young girls? But it felt predatory both times I was there.
Plus, older dudes back then looked like older dudes.
Yeah, like Vince Neil, like him being there made sense.
Fred Dreyer, according to Star 80, I was doing some research on Star 80. Apparently, he just lived there. Like they had to be like, Fred, you got to go.
Well, I mean, it was. I mean, it's one of the nicer homes I've ever been in. I mean, you've been there.
Yeah,
like
it's insane.
It's like it's hard to describe what that mansion was. Just even the pool room, which was like where the video games and pinball machines were. That's nicer than most people's house.
Well, interestingly enough, Sandra Theodore is one of the women on the famous Playboy pinball machine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's her and Playmate Patty McGuire. So, one more credit to wrap up from Dan Peterson. He was featured a lot in the documentary. He made an appearance on 30-something in 1990. Of course, you remember Peter Horton, and who else? Who was the female lead on that?
I've tried to get Peter Horton on my podcast so much.
Oh, that'd be a great interview.
Let's start a Twitter rampage.
Well,
guys.
he always gets back to me, but I could tell because his first role I think it was his first role, he told me, was in The White Shadow, which was a great.
Yes.
It was one of my. I just was on some other podcast.
Do you remember Eric Edwards' bit about the White Shadow?
Vaguely, but
It's The White Shadow.
Long story short, it's a great. It was only 3 seasons.
Yep.
It was a groundbreaking. It was like an ensemble version of All in the Family. About a white coach. He has a NBA, blows out his knee, can't play anymore. He still loves the game, so he goes to
It's like
school.
the air up there. Sorry, go
Yeah.
on.
This guy really knows how to fucking.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Oh, dude, you are the worst, bro. I mean,
okay, go on.
I wish I could make you go back to Chick-fil-A and get me food. It was so he goes to coach in a ghetto. So it was
Black
a heavy.
kids. Yeah.
Mainly black kids, one Mexican kid, and then I don't know how the Jewish kid got on the team, Goldstein. But
I think he might have known somebody in the business.
groundbreaking, though. Like, for the topics that they went over, rape, abortion.
Yeah.
And in Peter Horton's episode, and I believe he told me it was his first acting role, he plays a gay high school student. He goes to Carver High because the kids at his old school are bullying him. So one day they go to play pickup basketball at a park. So they're playing. All of a sudden, some kids from his old high school show up to play, and they're calling him a fag. And like, this is on CBS on Monday night. So you hear the word fag.
Yeah.
Like,
But it was
now,
educational.
but like now, if you did that scene, kids would be like, we just heard Ludacris say the N-word 40 times on his music.
Yeah, but it's still not. I don't think except
But like, to
I see
hear
what you
that
mean.
word
Sure.
on, because there was no FX, there's no HBO,
yeah.
there's no, there might have been HBO, there's no Hulu, there's no Amazon Prime. It was 3 networks.
Sure.
So to have a show that edgy, that was really, outside of All in the Family, my first comedy influence.
Oh.
Because my favorite episode is when the coach takes 2 black players in Salami. He was the Italian kid who ended up directing all of The Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire. Like, the group of kids that later, they all became like big producers and directors. Thomas Carter, Kevin Hooks. The coach takes them to this racist country club, and it's the funniest.
Was this an hour or a half hour?
It was an hour.
It was an hour.
Oh shit.
This episode, I believe it's season 2, called Lynx.
Wow.
The racial zingers that they were
Remember.
getting off. There's a scene where Coolidge, the big center, gets out of the car, and Salami goes, "Hey, cool, nice knickers." And Coolidge goes, "What'd you call me?" Like, it's dumb.
Yeah.
It's
and
baby,
then
baby.
they're at the grill room getting food, and the coach he says, "I'll have the roast beef au jus." And Salami goes, "Is that how Goldstein gets it?" And then the waiter, who's this old black dude, asks Thorpe, "How do you want your food?" And he's like, "On a plate." Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the weakest of the jokes, but like, it was just so groundbreaking.
Sure.
Now, if you showed The White Shadow to a teenager today, they'd be like, "This is so fucking boring."
Yeah.
Right.
But Mark Tinker, who did a lot of the episodes, produced it. He was the producer of the Babe Ruth movie I did.
Oh, okay.
So when I walked up to him, I said, dude, I love the White Shadow. I think he gave me an extra line just because I told him that.
Yeah. You've been in 2 sports movies. You're also in Benchwarmers, of course.
Benchwarmers. But here's the funny thing about the Babe Ruth story. I lied and said I played pro baseball. Now, I was, I think, 21 at the time. So I'll remember in one of the scenes we're warming up. We're just playing catch. And the Pashorek brothers were in this movie. Now, I'm sure this has never been said on a podcast before. Their brother was Tom Pashorek, a pretty famous baseball player in the 80s. So we had on 1920s replica Mets. And if you've ever seen baseball,
they're like milk cartons.
Yeah, they're like very little padding. And these guys were minor league pro baseball players.
Yeah.
So I felt like I broke bones in my hands.
Yeah.
Because they're like, all right, guys, action. And the Pachork brothers are throwing hard fucking ball. And I'm like, it hurt. And then we would have farting contests. And then the funniest thing is one of them came into my work. I was working at the Sports Connection. And I said, hey, if you guys ever want to work out, I work here. And one of them came in and he works out. And as he's leaving, he opens up the door and goes, hey, Earl, and rips the loudest fart I've ever heard in my life in the whole front desk. Get this fucking clown out of here.
Couple more to go through from Dan
Jesus
Peterson.
Christ. Oh, okay.
Fred Dreyer made me think of Hunter. He did an episode of Hunter.
I met him at Bookstore.
Fred.
Dreyer.
Yeah, I met him once. He was a very cool guy.
Very
Republican.
I thought you said you met him at Best Buy.
I forget my aunt. I think I said, hey, Detective Hunter, do you know what time it is? And he looked at me and was like, come on, bro.
Yeah.
But then he told me what time it was.
He did an episode of Mad About You where he played Mad Dog Reese. And then, of course, we're going to come full circle. He was also in Perfect as well.
Well, Perfect, if... it's been a minute since I've seen it.
I'm going to watch it tonight.
It's a guilty pleasure. Like if you're high, I'm not saying you, but like if you want to get high or do shrooms, it's a pretty funny movie too. It's just the quintessential 80s fun movie. Like Cruisin' is like the an American Gigolo are pretty dark representatives of the 80s, but it's because of the lighting and the cinematography. But Perfect is just such an implausible movie,
right?
And it just
we're hanging out in the gym sculpting our bodies to be perfect. That's the pitch, isn't it?
That's John Travolta. He did some article on like the Rolling Stones, for Rolling Stone. That's who he works for.
Yeah,
and it doesn't do well, so he's like really struggling to find out what the next article should be about. And somehow I think he saw like a cover of not Muscle and Fitness, but one of those fitness magazines about the American Gym is the new singles bar.
Yeah.
So they sent him out here to. So it's pretty, and this is prime Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean, Trading Places, Jamie Lee. I think it's the same year.
Yeah.
Or maybe the
85.
So this might have been
Trading Places was 83. I want to say.
Yeah, no, it was because that was the first date I took Jenny Molina out to. She was so hot, dude. Oh my god, and no one believed me that I had a hot girlfriend because she went to Westlake High. I went to Notre Dame High. So when I would tell people at Notre Dame High I had a hot girlfriend, they were like, "Okay, dude, we've never seen her before." It was like Jan Brady, George Glass, but I mean, and she still is amazing looking. So I would recommend Perfect if you're just if you're trying to show a date or a whatever about the 80s, but they might not like it. Like my last I guess ex-fiance, ex-girlfriend, whatever you want to call it, she was 29. No, it was 27 when we started dating, and then we dated till she was 30. We had this thing where she was always trying to get me to watch James Bond with Daniel Craig because I'd never seen one.
I love the Daniel Craig Bonds. I just recently watched all of them.
Great.
All of them are brilliant, except Quantum of Solace. It's a little weak.
I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a date night.
Brilliant and
We're gonna have
weak.
a date night where we watch one Daniel Craig movie and you have to watch one Roger Moore movie. That's my James Bond.
Yeah. Well, The Spy Who Loved Me one of the best in
Jaws, only because of Jaws.
Right. But then when you got into like the Moonraker shit and the campiness, I just cannot do it. But those early Roger Moores, they're solid. And not only that, Carly Simon tying the bow on The Spy Who Loved Me with one of the best Bond songs of all time. I agree.
mean,
to a certain point, the Moore was great.
my favorite villain is Jaws. Like,
Absolutely.
but they turned him into a good guy at the end of Moonraker. She did not like Moonraker, is the point. She's like, this is kind of hokey.
Well, that's when they were literally putting lasers on sharks in space. It was out of control.
But the first Star Wars was, the asteroid fields were baked potatoes. And if you look now, it's like,
They
oh my
fixed
God,
them now.
that is a baked potato.
Yeah, they fixed them now.
But my
also.
favorite opening of any James Bond is Moonraker, when he's in the plane and I love how sexist the Roger Moore James Bonds were.
Yeah.
Where he's feeling the stewardess's leg, and she goes, "Any higher, Mr. Bond, and my ears will pop." And he says, "Excuse me, I don't know if I'll ever fly again." And she goes, "You're so correct, Mr. Bond." And then they throw him out of the plane, and then Jaws comes after him.
Yeah, flying in.
But like, if you obviously the advances in stunt film is advanced 100-fold. But if you look at that scene now, you can clearly tell it's not. Like, I really thought it was Roger Moore.
Right.
It's how dumb I was, but I was 10 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see the guy playing Richard Keel, who in real life was 7'2" or whatever he was. It's clearly not Richard. The camera work is brilliant, how they cheat it, where it kind of looks like Jaws, but I just love Jaws, man.
Yeah.
He
I think he had 4 appearances.
Only 2, Spy Who Loved Me and
Are you sure about that? You only live twice?
100%. He was only in 2. He was Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker. I think someone said they wanted to bring him back, but they did not. So
Well, on our show, once we finish a doc, we decide to rate it and assign it a number of dockings. So you and I both watched this documentary. On a scale of 1 to 4, meaning 1's the worst, 4's the best, how many dockings would you give this podcast?
the podcast or the actual documentary?
Excuse me, the documentary.
Documentary.
Do them both, Earl. Do them both.
I mean, it was good. I mean, I thought you could have probably done it in 3 episodes.
I agree.
Little long in the tooth. I wish they would have interviewed more people other than Michael.
Yep.
Now, I'm sure in this, they did interview the bald dancer
Roger.
with the
Roger
yes.
Minash.
But sadly, I'm sure a lot of those dancers died of AIDS.
Yeah.
Like if you, no, I'm not kidding. I like.
Sorry to laugh.
But if you
Probably
look
right.
at
Can't
some
say
of
it
the
like that.
scenes where Nick is teaching them how to dance,
Yeah.
clearly some of them were at the minimum bisexual.
Well, and we forgot to bring this up. They made it a mandatory policy to only have one black man in every show.
Wow.
They couldn't have more than one.
you can't have
That was a
black
banner
Oh, you
guy.
can't have more than one. I
Yeah,
thought
it was a
you-
banner
I thought you meant
rule.
you
Well, you
could
can't have a black
at
guy
least
in
one.
those type of speedos. Like it's just like no girl's gonna want to look at any other guy. I mean, it's like literally.
Yeah,
a
they think they're
baseball
going to
bat.
be. They think they're going to be hung.
And then you look
after
at
the
Mike,
show.
the
Literally.
perfect man. Yeah.
Would you call it a banana hammock?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I played
banana.
on a hockey team once called the Banana Hammocks. I didn't really know what that meant. So it was a team full of Filipinos and me.
Well, they don't mean the same thing.
I'm a
I don't
grape
think.
smuggler guy myself.
Shout out to the DeKoikoi brothers.
Hopefully, we don't have to cut that out. either.
No, they were so fucking fast, and they all played soccer, so they had this amazing hand-eye coordination, and I just had the shot. But I'll give it a. No documentary's perfect, so I'll give it a solid 3.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's 3 for me. It was over long. And if you are going to watch the documentary, you need to put the closed captions on episode 4. Because for some reason on my first watch, I couldn't hear any of the recordings when they're getting Banerjee.
Right? Yeah, that was not the best, and I thought I would have liked to. They pretty much interviewed the 2 girls. Mike's
Yes.
wife
Yes.
and the older.
By the way, how about her lips?
oh boy, I mean, it's I've never seen plastic surgery make anyone look better.
I have. Well, thanks again, man.
Thank you, man. I love you guys. When is this out?
It'll be out Wednesday. We have to decide if we're going to break it up into 2 parts because this is a record.
I have an idea. We'll talk
While
about
you
it
guys
later.
do that, I gotta pee. I hate to leave a
Okay,
podcast.
no.
early.
We're leaving. No, we can't go on any
keep
longer.
Going, like,
That's
do the
it,
plugs.
guys. We're out. Give us 5 stars on Apple Pod. Send us an email if you want at downonthedocspod@gmail.com. And of course, don't forget to join the Discord. We love your contributions for documentary suggestions as well. So we'll be back next week. Dave, what do you want to say?
Yeah, dude. Thank you. Hey, write a freaking review. It helps us all. Retard sexual blowtorch. Keep making us memes. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you next week. Bye.